Chapter 307. Duke Qinghua was a title that few outside the Hulei dynasty knew about. He was so low-key that it was a bit too much. However, it was this person who led the 300,000 elite troops of the Hulei dynasty and defeated the Lihua dynasty time and time again. There was already a gap in strength between the two dynasties. After Li Yan's death, the power balance between the two dynasties had been reshuffled. The transition period between the new and the old had yet to pass, causing the two dynasties to tilt even further. The four extreme sacred lands' main focus was on the divine land. They didn't want to completely fall out with the Hulei emperor for the time being. This caused the war between the two dynasties to be even more intense. The Li dynasty of the Lihua dynasty was in danger. Even with the support of the empress and Li Yue, how could a young emperor take on such a huge responsibility? There were more and more voices of dissent in the court. Under the pressure of the war, it was harder to control the hearts of the people. The Lihua dynasty couldn't stop the 300,000 elite troops of the Hulei army. The few reverends of the Lihua dynasty couldn't stop Duke Qinghua's Khanate forces either. They were defeated without any suspense. The Lihua dynasty had no chance of winning since the beginning of the war. The sacred land didn't really care about the outcome of the war. As long as the rulers of the two dynasties were still under the sacred land's control, it was enough. The four extreme armies selected from the various sects, and the four dynasties, continued to gather in batches. They were then sent to the sacred land in batches, and sent to the divine land. Emperor Sudden Thunder was very cooperative with this part of the army. However many the Holy Land wanted, he would give them without any discount. The Hulei emperor knew very well that this was the four extreme realms' bottom line. As long as they didn't go against the four extreme sacred land, the sacred land wouldn't have any extra energy to interfere in the war between the two dynasties. In the Lihua palace, Li Yue read the battle reports one after another. Her beautiful face didn't show a single smile. The Hulei army was stronger than she had imagined. With the addition of the unstoppable Duke Qinghua, the war was basically one-sided. However, this was under the condition that the Hulei dynasty didn't send out all their top forces. She knew very well that the Hulei dynasty still had Jianghua, who wasn't any weaker than Duke Qinghua. If he also appeared on the battlefield, the Lihua dynasty's situation would be even worse. Li Yue then thought of Ning Chen's condition. Military power wasn't a small matter. Once it was handed over, the consequences would be unpredictable. However, Lihua really needed a top expert who could contend against Duke Qinghua. Your Highness, have you made up your mind? At this moment, a white figure walked out from the main hall of the imperial palace. It was silent, as if it had appeared out of thin air. It was shocking. Li Yue's pupils shrank subconsciously. The hall of worship was right next to the main hall, so why wasn't there any reaction? There's no need to think about it. Your consecrators won't be able to sense me. Ning Chun was able to tell what the woman was thinking with a single glance. Young Master Ning, it's impossible to hand over the military power. Please change your condition. Yue will try her best to fulfill it. Li Yue was still unwilling to give in easily. As she spoke, she observed the changes in the former's expression. Then there's nothing more to say. See you again. Ning Chun smiled faintly, turned around, and walked out without hesitation. Li Yue bit her lips, hoping that the former would turn around. Unfortunately, she was disappointed. When Ning Chun was about to leave the hall, Li Yue had no choice but to stop him. She sighed and said, "Young master, wait a moment." Ning Chun turned around and looked at the woman in front of him. A trace of emotionless coldness flashed across the corner of his mouth. "Young Master Ning, you really are ruthless." A trace of misery flashed across Li Yue's face. She had thought that she was ruthless enough, but she hadn't expected that the young man in front of her was the one she truly hated the most. No matter how she begged, he didn't care about their past relationship at all. Sometimes she even suspected that this icy cold and emotionless man was the same person as the Ning Chun who had been gentle and a bit shy in front of her back then. "Commander's seal." Ning Chun extended his hand. Li Yue turned around and took out half a jade talisman from her clothes. She handed it over and said, "The other half of the commander's seal is in King Xuanhua's hands. I will write a letter to him. I hope young Master Ning can keep your promise. Ning Chun received the other half of the commander's seal that belonged to the Li Hua imperial family and put it away. He had finally obtained what he wanted. I know what to do. As soon as he finished speaking, his clothes scattered and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Li Yue let out a heavy sigh. She hoped that this decision of hers wouldn't be wrong again. Otherwise, the Li clan really would be unable to protect itself. In an abandoned ancient temple 50 miles away from the Longevity Hall, the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor sensed an approaching aura and suddenly opened his eyes. Golden light shone brightly. After over a month, his injuries from the previous battle had mostly healed. Ningchen walked over. Seeing the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor, he respectfully bowed as usual and asked, Senior Golden Staff, how are your injuries? What is it? The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor frowned. If Senior's injuries are healed, it'll be best if you set off as soon as possible to find the whereabouts of the Phoenix blood, replied Ningchen. You're in a rush? A strange light flashed through the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor's eyes. Senior must be joking. No one wants to obtain such a divine item as soon as possible, said Ningchen matter-of-factly. There's no rush. I still haven't fully recovered. Let's wait a few more days. As he spoke, the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor slowly closed his eyes. Suspicion flashed through his heart. Why was this brat even more anxious than him? Could it be that he was planning on using him to find the Phoenix blood before launching a sneak attack while he was still injured? No matter what, it was always better to be careful. Then Senior can rest at ease and recover. Junior won't disturb you any longer, said Ning Chun with some regret. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor didn't say anything else. Ning Chun left with disappointment. Only when he walked out of the temple did he regain his composure. In the next moment he headed west. A day later, an azure-robed young master appeared outside the Cherishing Flower Palace. He had come to visit an old friend. When a Xiantian Venerate descended upon the Cherishing Flower Palace, even Palace Master Cherishing Flower wasn't willing to slight him. She personally received him. May I ask who you are? Asked Palace Master Cherishing Flower as she looked at the unfamiliar young man. I am Wang Qinyuan, the cousin of Wang Yu and Wang Yu. I heard that the two of you were defeated by the Cherishing Flower Palace, so I came to pay you a visit. The azure-robed young master fanned himself with a smile. Palace Master Cherishing Flower frowned. How come she didn't know that Wang Yu and Wang Yu had a cousin? Dan Ning, call Wang Yu and Wang Yu out, ordered Palace Master Cherishing Flower. Yes. A woman in a jade-green dress walked out. She bowed and accepted the order before leaving. Not long after, two beautiful women walked into the hall. One was as gentle as water, while the other was as graceful as a spirit. Although their appearances were similar, they each had their own charm. Palace Master. Wang Yu and Wang Yu bowed respectfully and said, Rise. Wang Yu, this young master Wang Qinyuan claims to be your cousin. Do you have any recollection of him? Asked Palace Master Cherishing Flower seriously. Wang Yu was startled. She glanced at the azure-robed young master and didn't understand. Beside her, Wang Yu also frowned slightly. She and Wang Yu definitely didn't have a cousin. However, as a Xiantian Venerable, there was no need for him to casually say such a thing. Palace Master. My two cousins left home when they were young, so they definitely don't have any recollection of me. Can you give me some time to speak with my two cousins alone? Asked the azure-robed young master with a smile. Since a Xiantian Venerable had spoken, Palace Master Cherishing Flower couldn't refuse him directly. She looked at Wang Yu and let them decide for themselves. Wang Yu thought for a moment, then nodded lightly and agreed. The three of them then walked towards the west wing. When they arrived, Wang Yu stopped and said softly, Young Master Ning, we are honored by your presence. May I know the reason for your visit? Heh. Ningchen chuckled. With a wave of his hand, light flashed, and he returned to his original appearance. Lady Wang Yu is indeed extraordinarily intelligent. You guessed it so quickly, praised Ningchen. It's you, exclaimed Wang Yu, who had only just regained her senses. Wang Yu, you are already hopelessly stupid, said Ningchen with a kind smile. Wang Yu's canine teeth flashed. She bared her fangs and pounced over. However, a hand pressed against her forehead, preventing her from taking even half a step forward. Wang Yu ignored the two of them and asked gently, "Young master, didn't you go back? Why have you come back?" "It's a long story," sighed Ningchen. He took out a luminous pearl that he had prepared beforehand and tossed it to Wang Yu. He smiled and said, "I have something to discuss with your sister. Let's stop fooling around." Wang Yu caught the luminous pearl and immediately smiled happily. She didn't even care about the deep hatred between the two of them. She ran to the side and slowly studied it. Ningchen told her everything that had happened in the past few days, including the Disaster King and the Palace of Immortality. He didn't hide anything. Wang Yu listened quietly. When Ningchen finished, she said softly, "Young master, you want me to help you seal the passage between the two realms?" "Yes." Ningchen nodded and continued, "Lady Wang Yu should be able to see that as long as the passage between the two realms isn't completely sealed, the war between the four realms and the divine continent will never end. If they continue fighting like this, both sides will suffer in the end." Wang Yu fell silent. This was not an easy choice. If they failed, they would undoubtedly face the wrath of the realm master. Even if she wasn't afraid, the Cherishing Flower Palace was. However, Ningchen's words were also true. The war between the two realms would cause great harm to both the four realms and the divine continent. In just a short year, 2 Xiantian experts and no less than 100 disciples of the Cherishing Flower Palace had been sent to the battlefield of the divine continent by the sacred land. Their fate was unknown. After a long time, Wang Yu raised her head and asked seriously, "Young master, how confident are you?" 70%, said Ningchen seriously. Just as Wang Yu was about to answer, a woman's voice rang out from outside the west wing. There was some unease in her voice. "Wang Yu, it's bad. The sacred land has sent another order. This time they want you to go." Ningchen narrowed his eyes when he heard this. A trace of unease flashed through his heart. What was going on? Chapter 308. No one dared to go against a holy land's decree. She could only go. She had no other choice. "I'll wait for the day you succeed." The forgotten sorrow smiled gently, then walked away with light steps. Yi walked away alone. For some reason, Wang Yu felt empty in her heart, as if something bad was about to happen. She looked at the man beside her and asked worriedly, "Will sister be fine?" "She'll be fine." Ningchen comforted her. "Your sister has a Dao body. Few people can match her. Don't worry." Wang Yu nodded. She felt a bit better. "I still have other things to do, so I have to leave. Don't reveal my identity." Ningchen flicked the little girl's forehead and softly instructed her. "Yes." Wang Yu nodded. Reluctance flashed on her face. Her sister had left, so he had to leave as well. Now she was the only one left. Ningchen could see the loneliness in her expression, but he still left. His watery light scattered and disappeared from her sight. In the southwest of the Lihua dynasty, in front of Duke Qinghua's camp, a young figure slowly walked over. His black hair fluttered in the wind, and his aura surged. Within the commander's tent, Duke Qinghua's eyes narrowed. He waved his hand and put away the saber on the table in front of him. The light of the bright moon shone on the ground, reflecting a boundless moonlight. The figure walking over slowly under the moonlight had a calm expression, not showing any killing intent. The sovereign sword in the mahogany box on his back withdrew all his sword intent. "May I ask how I should address you, brother?" asked Duke Qinghua. "Forgotten worldly fate," replied Ningchen casually. "You're not from the Lihua dynasty." Duke Qinghua immediately saw that this person was not from the Lihua dynasty, nor was he from the Holy Land. He had never seen such an unfamiliar aura before. "I'm just a guest from a foreign land." Ningchen took the box off his back and placed it on the ground. "Brother, do you really want to fight?" asked Duke Qinghua. "If you retreat, there's naturally no need to fight," replied Ningchen. "Haha." Duke Qinghua smiled gently and clenched his right hand. White lightning appeared in his hand. His saber flickered with white lightning, causing the surrounding space to shriek. "White lightning scar, please advise me." "Please." Facing the opponent before him, Ningchen did not hesitate. With a jerk of his right hand, the wooden box opened, and the great green sparrow sword flew out. The cry of the sparrow resounded through the heavens and earth. The surging sword intent instantly rippled out, causing dust and sand to dance in the air, obscuring one's vision. In the tent, the two honorary elders of the Hule dynasty immediately gave up on the idea of helping when they sensed the powerful sword will. A battle like this was not something they could handle. His opponent's martial prowess was extraordinary, and Ning Chun gave him enough respect. He did not use the remembrance saber that sealed the longevity's luck. With this sword in hand, victory or defeat was up to him. In the next moment, the two figures disappeared at the same time. The sword and the saber clashed for the first time. Sand flew everywhere and killing intent filled the sky. At the beginning of the duel, although there was no deep hatred, everyone had their own standpoints and no one held back. The white lightning left behind dazzling flashes of lightning, and the cries of the green sparrow sword of Dayan shook the heavens. The intense duel between the two was beyond common sense and shocked everyone present. The narrow and sharp saber was oppressively sharp. Combined with the white lightning, it became an unstoppable peerless weapon. Duke Qinghua used the unique movement technique of the azure flower lineage, moving like lightning. He was so fast that no one could see him clearly. The green sparrow sword of Dayan was the edge of the emperor. Sword intent flowed, and with the help of the flowing light shadow body, it also quickly fell apart. Speed clashed against speed. The flowing light from the clash of swords and sabers brushed past Xiao Chen's ears. His hair fell, drifting down silently. Cold killing saber and extremely fast sword. The two figures quickly separated and came back together. Clanging sounds rang out endlessly. As the saber and sword light intersected, the scattered saber and sword light split the ground, forcing the people behind to retreat again and again. Who is this person? How can he be so capable? Asked one of the Hule imperial family's honorary elders. I've never heard of him. This is the first time I've seen someone who can fight with the Duke to such an extent, said another solemnly. White lightning sparks, heaven and earth line. Seeing that his opponent was even more extraordinary than he had imagined, Duke Qinghua's saber changed direction. White lightning flourished, and his saber flashed. His figure flashed, and only white lightning could be seen. Ning Chun didn't dare to be careless. His sword spun rapidly, and snowflakes fell from the sky. The green sparrow sword condensed wind and frost, and the sword created a snowstorm. The two extreme moves collided, and the world became hazy. Both sides took 2 steps back, their blood roiling. With such ability, you shouldn't be unknown. As he spoke, Duke Qinghua's figure moved once more, summoning a body of wind and lightning. White lightning slashed down, shocking the world. Ning Chun smiled faintly, and the green sparrow sword met it head-on. There was a great explosion, and the sword intent and saber light scattered. Everything within a radius of 300 meters was reduced to ruins. This was a clash of foundations after extreme speed. The clash between the two powerhouses formed a huge forbidden zone. Boundless torrents flowed out in all directions, whistling as they rushed forward with unstoppable force. In the intense clash, Duke Qinghua suddenly felt a chill rise around him. His expression changed slightly, and he sent out a palm strike, breaking the deadlock. The white lightning was stained with frost, and the sound of thunder gradually weakened. The peerless foundation in the world couldn't even support a peerless divine weapon, and it was beginning to show signs of being frozen. Duke Qinghua frowned slightly, and his saber shook, dispersing the ice and snow. The person in front of him had a strong foundation, and he had never seen one before. Please retreat, Ning Chun said once more. Forgive me for not being able to comply. After speaking, Duke Qinghua's expression became unprecedentedly serious. He knew that he was just testing the waters. What came next was the true battle of life and death. White lightning circled and hissed, and the divine weapon became even sharper with the support of the lightning. The lightning flashed with white light, and it was very dazzling in the night. Pardon me, Ning Chun said softly, and the green sparrow sword was stained with frost. An extremely cold air spread out, and the scene of winter reappeared in the vast world. Snowflakes drifted down, like white lotuses in the wind, clean and flawless. The moment they fell, the battle began again. The figure disappeared silently, and a wisp of watery light moved, and when it reappeared, it was already in front of him. The green sparrow sword of Dayan cried out for the first time. and the sword intent was completely different. Duke Qinghua waved his saber to meet it, and the sword that met it was unstoppable. With a bang, Duke Qinghua retreated 3 steps, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. It was the first time he saw blood since the battle started. Ning Chen did not show any mercy, and his figure flashed, and he pressed forward again. His sword moved with great force, and with his unparalleled foundation, he suppressed the lightning and wind saber. Using force to break speed, Duke Qinghua immediately fell into a disadvantage. He lost the initiative, and it was difficult for him to take it back. He walked step by step towards the abyss of defeat. Seeing that the situation was not good, the 2 imperial consecrators did not care about anything else, and rushed into the battle, wanting to help. No, Duke Qinghua's expression changed, and he wanted to stop them, but it was too late. Ning Chen's lips curled into a cold smile, and his sword aura changed rapidly. He pushed Duke Qinghua away with one palm, and then drew the wind and snow around him, and his sword split open the vast world. Pung! Pung! Blood splattered everywhere. 2 figures flew out, covered in blood, and crashed into the ground. The 2 Xiantian experts did not block a single move. It wasn't that they were weak, but that they had chosen the wrong time. Entering the battle when the swordsman's sword intent was at its strongest was undoubtedly the most unwise thing to do. Ning Chen had heavily injured the 2, but at the last moment, he had held back 30% of his power, leaving them alive. If it wasn't necessary, he didn't want to form too deep of a grudge with the Sudden Thunder dynasty. Sensing that the 2 of them were still alive, Duke Qinghua's expression became slightly better. He looked back at the man in front of him and said solemnly, "This is the last move. Victory and defeat will be decided by fate." "Please," said Ning Chen. In the final clash, Duke Qinghua no longer held back. The white lightning around him roared and surged like a reverse lightning tribulation. It soared into the 9 heavens and terrified all gods. Facing this move, Ning Chen did not dare to be careless. Snow fell from his sword, and his sword intent reached its peak. In the blink of an eye, the 2 figures passed by each other. There was no heaven-shaking explosion, and the noise was calm. It was a bit too quiet. Ning Chen walked in front of the mahogany box and put the sword in it. Then, he picked up the box and walked away. Ugh! Behind him, blood spurted out from Duke Qinghua's chest. The sword had pierced through his heart. Victory and defeat were clear at this moment. Duke Qinghua had lost, but it wasn't a shameful loss. The difference in foundation wasn't something that could be overcome. From a certain perspective, this battle was already unfair. Ning Chen's foundation from the life scroll was unparalleled, and with the protection of his phoenix blood, he wouldn't lose to anyone below the 3 calamities. Duke Qinghua was extraordinary, but he was still quite a distance away from the 3 calamities. After this battle, the 3 Xiantian experts of the Sudden Thunder dynasty were all heavily injured. Even if they didn't retreat, they wouldn't be able to advance further north. Time flew by in the Divine Continent. It was another 3 months, and a figure in purple appeared in the imperial city of the Grand Xia. His handsome face was cold, but there was a smile on his face that sent chills down people's spines. The Lord of the Second Shrine of Evernight had personally come to the imperial city. This time, he was much more low-key. He used Divergent to seal his aura, as he looked at the princess residence. This was the first time Zhong Qianxiu had personally come for the 7 severing physique. Within the princess residence, Madame Luofei was sitting in the courtyard, calmly watching the changes in the world. She didn't care about what was happening in the imperial city. She was just a spectator, waiting to see what the Grand Xia's emperor would do. Zhong Qianxiu was afraid of the woman in the courtyard, and didn't want to fight her head-on. He was thinking about how to avoid Madame Luofei, and take away the 7 severing physique. The 7 severing physique was extremely important to Evernight's grand plan. He couldn't afford to lose it. The reason he had come personally was because he didn't want to miss another opportunity. He had to wait another 3 years. Inside and outside the mansion, there were different thoughts and different gazes. The 2 sides were not too far apart, but they did not interact with each other, nor did they want to interact with each other. At this critical moment, each of them was waiting for the outcome they wanted to see. "Hall Master, The nobles of the Grand Xia, as well as some of the nobles of the Grand Xia, are already on their way. They'll probably reach the imperial city in a few days, reported Remnant Wind. What about the Confucian sect? Have they made any movements? Asked Zhong Qianxiu calmly. Other than continuing to spread rumors, we haven't seen anything strange, replied Remnant Wind. Oh. Zhong Qianxiu narrowed his eyes and said coldly. Then help them fan the flames. Chapter 309. As Emperor Xia's wedding approached, all the nobles and nobles rushed to the imperial city. The gathering of nobles made the complicated situation in the imperial city even more confusing. The rumor that Xia Zi was the reincarnation of the Lord of Hell had caused the people's trust in the imperial family to drop to the lowest point. The Confucian sect used their influence to spread the rumor. Their ambitions were clear as day. As the rumor spread, it would become the truth in people's hearts. Some of the officials in the imperial court, who did not know the truth, began to believe the rumor, after seeing the white-haired figure on the dragon throne change day by day. Many people in the imperial court believed that Emperor Xia was the reincarnation of the Lord of Hell. The imperial court was still the imperial court, because no one dared to make the matter public. After all, it was a groundless accusation. No one dared to say such words in front of the emperor. Those who truly understood the truth could also see that this was a plot by the Confucian sect. They wanted to overthrow the imperial power, and they had been plotting for a long time. Kong Yu and the entire imperial court were still trying their best to investigate the crimes of the Confucian sect. Both sides had no evidence, and it was a matter of who could act first. No one knew if the Confucian sect would suppress the imperial power, or if the emperor would suppress the rebellion. The current situation was so complicated that it was difficult to see clearly. In the Heavenly Mandate Palace, Xia Zi was still paying attention to the war between the two borders and the latest epidemic in Nanjiang. The four extremes were causing trouble in the east, and the Eternal Night sect was invading in the west. In addition to the terrible epidemic after the flood in Nanjiang, the people of the imperial court were suffering greatly and could not bear the burden. The emperor was merciful and could not bear to see the people suffer. He raised the matter of reducing taxes that the 7 representatives had raised in the imperial court. Unexpectedly, it caused a wave of fierce opposition. Without a doubt, once the tax reduction was implemented, the people who would lose the most benefits were the nobles of the imperial court. As such, during the imperial court meeting, the nobles who were good at playing dead immediately stood out to oppose it. The most righteous reason was that the great Xia had been fighting for years, and the treasury was empty. If the taxes were reduced again, the imperial court would be in dire straits. Minister of Imperial Patronage, what do you think? Xia Zi asked as he looked at the Minister of Imperial Patronage. The other officials turned to the Minister of Imperial Relations. The conflict between the Confucian sect and the imperial authority was becoming more and more apparent. Although it had not yet erupted, many people had already guessed that the Confucian sect was behind the rumors. The Minister of Imperial Relations was the representative of the Confucian sect, and they wanted to see how he would respond. In any case, it was the Minister of Imperial Appointments who led the 7 elderly commoners into the Heavenly Mandate Palace on behalf of the commoners. Your Majesty, I think it's feasible. The Minister of Imperial Wealth stood up and said something shocking. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire hall was in an uproar. Many of the officials' expressions changed. How could the Minister of Imperial Wealth do something that would harm their interests? The Minister of Imperial Affairs was not in a hurry. He waited for the ministers to calm down before saying indifferently, however, the reduction of taxes should be based on the region and time limit. Otherwise, the country will not be able to make ends meet. Hearing these words, the quick-witted official immediately reacted as he thought to himself, the older the wiser. Minister, why don't you tell us how to base it on the region and time limit? Xia Zi's expression turned cold. For a rich place like Nanjiang, it's just an epidemic. It won't take long for it to recover, so there's no need to reduce taxes. On the contrary, for a poor place like Xinjiang, reducing taxes for 3 to 5 years is something that benefits the country and the people. The Minister of Imperial Affairs avoided the main point and focused on the trivial. As soon as these words were spoken, all of the officials understood, and they all agreed. Minister of Imperial Affairs is right. That's a good idea. The officials' agreement made Xia Zi's gaze turn even colder. It was true that Nanjiang was rich, but in the past half a year, there had been constant floods. Coupled with the spread of the epidemic, the people had no way of making a living. No matter how rich the commoners were, they could not withstand such an unforeseen event. As for the Xizjiang mentioned by the Minister of War, it had long become a barren land with few people because of the border between Great Xia and the Eternal Night cult. The reason was very obvious. Whether or not taxes were reduced in Xizjiang did not benefit these people much. On the other hand, Nanjiang had a large population. Every 10% reduction in taxes would result in heavy losses for the benefit chain along the way. According to what you're saying, the taxes of the Central Plains and the other two regions cannot be reduced? Xia Zi asked in a low voice. It's not that we can't reduce taxes, but we'll make a decision after seeing the results of the tax reduction in Xizjiang and other places. The Minister of Imperial Affairs replied. Xia Zi said with a cold glint in his eyes. This was obviously a delaying tactic. He didn't expect that a simple policy of reducing taxes would encounter such a huge resistance. According to the information that the Grand Preceptor had sent him, these officials were all filthy rich. 9 out of 10 officials were corrupt, and few of them were honest. They did not care about the lives of the commoners. Even in this chaotic world, they only cared about their own interests, and only cared about fame and fortune. Court is dismissed. Xia Zi did not want to continue feigning civility with these people and coldly said. The officials knelt and looked at each other before retreating with heavy hearts. They could tell that His Majesty had already made up his mind to reduce taxes. It was definitely not just empty talk. The previous Xia emperors had all reduced taxes before, but most of them were limited to very few regions. This was the first time that His Majesty had reduced taxes on such a large scale. The expressions of the officials in court were very unsightly. Between them, from top to bottom, the chain of benefits was inseparable. This tax reduction would completely disrupt their operations over the years. How could they tolerate this? The officials who hurriedly left could not hide the worry in their hearts. Apart from a few magnanimous and honest officials, most of them did not have the leisure of the past. It was the first time they had left so quickly. In the Confucian school's Dragon Garden, the Minister of Imperial Affairs reported what had happened today to the 3 Confucian school sovereigns, before respectfully retreating. It looks like the Xia dynasty's luck has run out. Sovereignly revealed a faint smile. Xia Zi's benevolence would become the final blade that would cut off the Xia dynasty's luck. Offending the officials of the court for the ignorant commoners was the height of stupidity. It's still too early to say that. After all, the Grand Xia's military power is still in the hands of the imperial family and the various martial marquises. If we can't use this chance to completely topple the Grand Xia's imperial family, once Xia Zi takes action first, or the various martial marquises return, there might be more variables, said sovereignly. The terror of the Grand Xia's martial marquises was not only due to their powerful martial prowess, but also due to the respect and trust of the Grand Xia's commoners. If any of the martial marquises could return to the court, they would be a considerable threat to them. The Grand Xia was a country that revered heroes. Although the Confucian school's influence was extraordinary and controlled half of the court, the martial marquises of the Grand Xia also had shocking influence. They were the greatest impediment to the Confucian school. With such a huge matter happening in the court, no matter how tense the war between the eastern and western borders was, there should be martial marquises taking advantage of the Xia emperors waiting to rush back. Leave the matter of the martial marquises to me. I will make sure none of them return, said Head Commander Lu coldly. The head commander nodded and warned, be careful. Although the various martial marquises have all been blocked from reaching the Xiantian realm because of their heavy killing intent, it won't be that easy to kill them. The power of the Grand Xia's martial marquises could not be completely judged by their cultivation bases. For example, the Marquis of Blood-Robed and the Marquis of Wuxia had both fought with experts on the level of the three calamities. Although they had both died in the end, in this world, just how many Xiantian experts were qualified to make the three calamities take action? Yes, I understand. Head Commander Li nodded. If she took action, she could only succeed. Failure was not an option. No one could bear the crime of assassinating a martial marquis. Once it was exposed, the Confucian school's reputation would rapidly plummet. Within the imperial city, in a residence not far from the princess residence, Zhong Qinxiu was sitting in front of a chessboard, playing chess with himself. At this time, Remnant Wind brought an elder into the hall. He respectfully bowed, and then calmly stood to the side. "Old Bai, is that so?" "Please sit," said Zhong Qinxiu calmly. "This commoner doesn't dare." "May I ask who you are?" asked the elder fearfully. Zhong Qinxiu faintly smiled. "I'm not some lord. I'm just an ordinary businessman." "Old Bai, there's no need to be so restrained." Only then did the elder dare to raise his head and carefully look at the young man in front of him. Noble, handsome, and someone who had been in power for a long time. This was Old Bai's first impression of the person in front of him. After this glance, Old Bai quickly lowered his head again, not daring to look at him for a moment longer. This young man's identity was definitely not ordinary. He was most likely a noble of the imperial court. Zhong Qinxiu ignored the former's change and changed the topic. "I heard that a few days ago, Old Bai had the honor of going to the palace to meet His Majesty. What do you think of the rumors that His Majesty is the reincarnation of the underworld king?" Old Bai's expression changed, and he didn't dare to say anything. Such words could be secretly spread among commoners, but no one dared to mention it in front of an official. If they were caught because of this, it would be a serious crime of insulting the emperor. Even beheading would be a light punishment. He had no right to control what this young master in front of him said, but he didn't dare to say anything. He couldn't joke around with his head. Seeing that the elder didn't dare to say anything, Zhong Qinxiu didn't mind. He pushed back a cup of tea and said, "Please drink." Old Bai hesitated for a moment, but he still picked it up. With his identity, it shouldn't be worth it for this person to poison him. Seeing the elder drink the tea, Zhong Qinxiu's lips curved into a smile that was hard to understand. He casually asked a few more questions, and then had Remnant Wind send him out of the palace. Remnant Wind returned not long after. He asked in confusion, "Palace Master, can such a lowly person be of any use?" The black pieces in Zhong Qinxiu's hand fell, and the white pieces on the tray all lost their vitality. Chess pieces don't depend on their status. As long as they find a suitable position, they will be able to play an unimaginable role. This person will be a crucial piece of soil that will bury the 1,000 years of prosperity of the Grand Xia Empire. Zhong Qinxiu glanced at the Grand Xia Empire in the distance. After so many years of war, this 1,000-year-old immortal behemoth was still standing strong, unshakable. However, if the plan of the divine sect succeeded this time around, Grand Xia would completely fall from glory to decline. Chapter 310. The situation in the imperial city changed so quickly. Nobles and nobles came from all over the place. Many manors that had been quiet for a long time were bustling again. After Xia Mingri ascended the throne, the princes who were crowned as kings in the past all had their own titles one after another. They no longer lived in the imperial court. Only King Shoshan, who was seriously ill, stayed in the imperial court. However, he lost his life in a conspiracy. After the kings arrived, they first paid their respects to their former brothers. As those who were not qualified to inherit the throne, they had a good relationship with each other. They had to pay their respects, whether it was for public or private reasons. Xia Yifei was a handsome name. His mother's lineage was not ordinary, and he was also a strong successor to the throne. However, he was seriously ill from a young age, and his hopes of inheriting the throne disappeared. The former Emperor Xia also had many regrets about this prince. Fortunately, Xia Yifei was open-minded. When he was sensible, he was depressed for a period of time, and gradually got over it. Xia Ziyi left the Heavenly Mandate Palace and followed the other kings to the Imperial Mausoleum to pay respects to King Shoshan. "Brother, the situation in the Imperial City is not right. You have to be careful. The former seventh prince, now King Tailing, looked at Xiazi, who had changed a lot. He sighed in his heart and reminded him, this brother was not a form of address between a ruler and an official, but it made Xiazi's eyes show a rare touch of gentleness. At this time, everyone was afraid of him. Only his brother would remind him out of concern. Seventh brother, don't worry. I will be careful. Xiazi replied softly. It was not a coincidence that the Xia kingdom could prosper for 1,000 years. Compared to other dynasties, the Xia kingdom's pride in their bloodline was far greater than anyone else's. The kings never believed in the words of the reincarnation of Yama. As a bystander, it was not too difficult to analyze the conspirators behind the scenes. On the side, the neighboring king who was once the 11th prince also reminded him, brother, you should deal with this matter as soon as possible. Fourth sister was angry because of these rumors in the neighboring cities. The rumors cannot be stopped. The people are too easily fooled. If you do not think of a way to solve it, it will eventually become a disaster. Brother, you are from the Confucian sect. Why do you oppose the Confucian sect to such an extent? The silent fifth prince, who was now King Luo, asked. It's a long story. Xiazi let out a deep sigh and continued. If I'm not wrong, what happened to Ming Tian and Yi Fei must be related to the Confucian sect. The Luo king's eyes narrowed slightly as he said, that's not right. Sixth brother has been frail and sickly since he was young. He has never had any grudges with anyone. The Confucian sect doesn't seem to have any reason to attack him. I've never been able to figure it out, but based on the Confucian sect's reaction, it should be true, Xiazi gravely replied. The eyes of the seven kings all turned serious. In this matter, the imperial family of the great Xia was bound together for good or ill. If the Confucian sect wanted to change the heavens, they would be the first to disagree. In the princess mansion, the fourth princess Xia Luzhu asked with a sullen expression, Xingyu, where did the Jiming Marquis go? Why hasn't he returned at such a critical time? Even these former princes and princesses knew that the Jiming Marquis and their eldest brother were best friends. Now that such a huge matter had happened, they had not heard of the Jiming Marquis' whereabouts. It was as if he had completely disappeared. In order to deal with the matter of the reinforcements from the four extremes, Ning Chun went to the four extremes several months ago. He might not be able to return in a short amount of time. Xia Xingyu did not hide anything from her fourth sister, who she was the closest to amongst the princes and princesses. Xia Luzhu was startled and then helplessly sighed. This was the first time in 1,000 years that the great Xia had been forced into such a difficult situation. The 8 martial marquises were all fighting outside. The enormous imperial city did not have a single martial marquis overseeing it. Xingyu, you don't need to worry too much. I heard that the Bai Marquis and the Xiang Marquis are already on their way back. They should be able to reach the imperial city soon. The Confucian sect's scheme will not succeed, comforted Xia Luzhu. Yes. Xia Xingyu lightly nodded. Her beautiful face forced a smile as she replied. In the northern Ming royal court, outside the imperial palace, 2 figures stood quietly in front of a simple and peaceful tomb. They had been there for a long time. Not far away, Jiang Hua was patiently waiting without any impatience. On the other side, Zi Jing was quietly waiting as usual, looking at the little girl standing in front of the tomb. Her beautiful eyes never left her for even a moment. Jiang Hua had a whole new level of respect for this unusually quiet girl. She was able to see through people and their hearts. It was rare to see a girl with such a calm heart. He had heard that this was a maid that Jiang Xian's master had specially left behind for the northern Ming emperor. If the maid was already like this, it could be seen how outstanding the girl called Fan Lingyue was. In front of the tomb, Ming Yu's expression carried a trace of sadness. An elder sister was like a mother. Unknowingly, Sister Lingyue had already passed away for nearly 4 years. Jiang Xian kowtowed in front of her master's tomb, once again performing the ceremony of becoming her disciple, fulfilling her final wish. The 2 of them stood in front of the tomb for a long time. Finally, it was time to leave. 100 steps away from the tomb was Northern Ming's full moon imperial army, waiting to escort the emperor back to the palace. Sister Jiang Xian, When you see Ning Chun, tell him to come back quickly. The situation in Great Xia is about to change, Mingyu instructed. Don't worry, Your Majesty. I will pass on the message, Jiang Xian replied softly. Mingyu looked at the tomb reluctantly, then turned and left. Zijing followed behind. Under the escort of 3,000 Full Moon Imperial Army, they returned to the northern Meng Imperial Palace. Let's go. It's time for us to go back. Jiang Hua walked forward and said. Yes. Jiang Xian replied softly. Taking one last look at the name on the tombstone, she also left with her brother. The wind was bleak, and the lonely tombstone was not buried in the imperial tomb. This was because Fan Lingyue had left behind her last words. She was guilty and could not enter the tomb. The failure to unify the world was the greatest crime. Fan Lingyue had never regretted going down south to conquer Great Xia. The sacrifice of millions of civilians and soldiers in the war was unavoidable. However, in the end she failed. Then, the sacrifice of the war completely lost its value. For extreme realms. In the past half a month, the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor and Ning Chun had almost turned the entire Longevity City upside down. Unfortunately, they still could not find any trace of Phoenix blood. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor's expression became worse and worse. Just as he was about to explode, he suddenly sensed an extremely weak aura of Phoenix blood in the distance. Let's go and take a look. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor called out in a deep voice, then immediately rushed forward. In the rugged forest of grotesque rocks, red fluorescent stars danced in the air like tiny fireflies. Seeing this red mist, the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor's eyes narrowed. The aura of Phoenix blood was actually coming from these little bugs. It was really strange. Senior Golden Staff Imperial Tutor, be careful. It seems a little strange, Ning Chun kindly reminded from the side. It's fine. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor walked forward and reached out to touch it. However, he felt an invisible restriction blocking the red mist. With a bang, the restriction shattered. In front of the three disasters, it was completely useless. In the next moment, the red mist flew out and surged towards the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor frowned. He felt the true qi in his body constantly flowing out. He was shocked. What a strange red mist. In the blink of an eye, traces of blood appeared on the hand that touched the red mist. The red mist not only devoured true qi, but also flesh and blood. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor's eyes turned cold. His true qi surged around him, crushing all the little bugs that flew out into ashes. White mist bug tide. Ning Chun seemed to have thought of something and revealed a strange expression. You know this thing? The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor turned his head and asked. Yes. Ning Chun nodded and continued. A few days ago, something extremely similar to this appeared during the Thunder Emperor's wedding. However, I heard that the bug tide was white and not this red mist. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor thought for a moment and said, That's right. These bugs have been fed with phoenix blood. It's not strange for them to change. After saying that, the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor turned his gaze and asked, Do you know where the white mist bug tide is raised? I'm not too sure. Ning Chun shook his head slightly. I only heard that the person who caused trouble at the Thunder Emperor's wedding was the Lihua dynasty's Duke Muyang. I have a bit of a friendship with the Lihua dynasty's earthly blacksmith, and he once mentioned that Duke Muyang seems to have some sort of connection with the four extreme holy lands. I presume this matter is related to the four extreme holy lands. For extreme holy lands, the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor narrowed his eyes. If possible, he really didn't want to face the master of the four extreme holy lands. Let's go take a look around the four extreme holy lands. Such a dangerous thing shouldn't be raised directly in the four extreme holy lands. Furthermore, since this white mist bug tide appeared at the Emperor's wedding, the four extreme holy lands wouldn't personally raise it, said the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor calmly. Senior's words are reasonable. Ning Chun gave a timely compliment. The two of them then rushed in the direction of the four extreme holy lands. After searching for so long, the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor, who had been about to give up, once again felt hope. These bugs were truly strange. Someone was actually raising them with phoenix blood. In that case, the master of the four extreme holy lands, and the disaster king, were very likely experimenting with something. There were very few bugs here. The place where the bugs were being raised was most likely under the control of the four extreme holy lands. In that case, the Longevity Hall's phoenix blood should have been sent there. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor believed in his own judgment. As long as he found the place where the bugs were being raised, he would be able to find the phoenix blood that the Longevity Hall had accumulated over tens of thousands of years. From start to finish, Ningchen didn't say much. He only gave some guidance at the appropriate times. As for the rest, he let the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor guess on his own. People were always more willing to believe in themselves than in others. Moreover, the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor was a very suspicious person. Rather than wasting his breath to arouse the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor's suspicion, it was better to let the old man's imagination run wild. He had already prepared everything he needed to prepare. Now he just needed to completely destroy the four extreme Holy Lands transportation formation and cut off the possibility of the four extreme Holy Lands sending reinforcements to the Divine Continent. As for sealing the passage between the two realms, although he didn't have absolute confidence in succeeding, he still had to try. However, there was still no news from his senior in Wild. That made him very worried. Chapter 311. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor and Ning Chun had been searching for over 10 days in the four extreme Holy Lands. They had searched all over the mountains and forests. Unfortunately, it was still the same. They couldn't find a place to feed the white mist insect tide. Although the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor didn't say anything, his expression was frighteningly gloomy. If they went any further, they would enter the direct domain of the four extreme Holy Lands. If they accidentally touched a formation, it was very likely they would attract the attention of the masters of the four extreme Holy Lands. No one was willing to face an unfathomable opponent, and the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor was the same. Split up and search. If you find anything, immediately contact me, said the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor. Yes. Ningchen nodded and directly flew east. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor didn't think too much about it and flew west as well. The two of them continued their search. What the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor didn't know was that Ning Chun had returned not long after he left. He used the Chaos Scroll to conceal his aura and flew northwest. The place where the white mist insect tide was being fed was probably in the direction the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor had gone. However, it was a bit off. If they searched blindly, who knew how long it would take? Ningchen appeared in front of Lingchuan Labyrinth. Looking at the valley shrouded in white mist, he flipped his right hand, and a drop of blood flew out. It immediately turned into a bloody mist that spread through the valley. After doing that, his white clothes scattered and rapidly disappeared. In the distance, the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor sensed the extremely weak aura of the phoenix blood. His body shook and he immediately changed directions heading north. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor arrived in front of the labyrinth. When he saw the white mist up ahead, he stopped and smiled. His guess had been correct. The endless white mist didn't look much different from ordinary mist from a distance. However, when he got closer, he could see that it was actually formed from flying insects. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor looked at the white mist and pondered for a moment before walking in. It was enough for him to obtain the phoenix blood. As long as it wasn't the four extreme Holy Lands overseen by the masters of the four extreme Holy Lands, he could go anywhere he wanted. He didn't need anyone's help. Half an hour after the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor went in, Ningchen appeared with a cold smile on his face. He activated the Scroll of Earth with all his might. In an instant, the entire ground shook. The rumbling of the earthquake was like a great earthquake. Rocks and boulders collapsed and rolled down. The huge commotion could be felt clearly by ordinary people hundreds of miles away. Lingchuan. In the Four Extremities Holy Land, the expression of the Lord of the Four Extremities Holy Land changed. He suddenly looked in the direction of the Lingchuan maze. Killing intent flickered in his eyes. Someone had actually discovered the white fog insect swarm. In the next moment, the multicolored light shot out and rushed toward the Lingchuan labyrinth. Inside the canyon, the Golden Staff Imperial Advisor who was surrounded by the white fog insect tide, also felt the ground tremble. His heart trembled. What was going on? Tens of thousands of insects had blocked all the paths. The Golden Staff Imperial Master knew that the earthquake had probably attracted the attention of the masters of the four extremes. He could not care about anything else. He unleashed his power and swept away all the insects around him. Time was of the essence. The Golden Staff Imperial Advisor did not dare to delay, and hurriedly tried to escape. However, at this moment, Yuan Zun and the other innate ranker finally noticed the intruder in the valley. Their figures flashed and quickly blocked in front. Get lost! The Golden Staff Imperial Advisor was furious. He turned his palm and condensed chi. Vast chi gathered, and the universe shook. Rays of light spread out, and forced the two of them back a few steps. Stop him! Knowing that the Realm Master would arrive soon, Yuan Zun and the blue-robed old man were not afraid. They forcefully raised their chi, and faced the unfamiliar Three Disasters ranker in front of them. The mutated martial body was extremely strange. His bronze hands welcomed the Golden Staff Imperial Advisor's power. The sound of metal clashing could be heard continuously. The intense battle was shocking. The white fog insect tide was swept away wave by wave, and immediately gathered again. The strong vitality and endless numbers were terrifying. The Golden Staff Imperial Advisor's hand was controlled by the white fog insect tide. He could not fully unleash his power. His palm attack was 7 to attack and 3 to defend. He blocked the white fog insect tide, and the attacks of the two innate rankers. In the distant four extreme sacred ground, the five-colored light rapidly approached. Not long after, it swept into the insect tide, and completely blocked the Golden Staff Imperial Advisor's escape route. The Three Disasters rankers of the Divine Great Land, and the four extremes sacred ground faced each other. The atmosphere was extremely solemn. When they looked at each other, one was furious, and the other was gloomy and fearful. There was no exchange of words. Both palms condensed vast chi and crossed. Suddenly a wild mist overflowed. The endless white fog could not withstand this terrifying power, and instantly turned into ashes. Yuan Zun and the blue-robed old man saw that the Realm Master had arrived and quickly retreated. Outside the valley, the white-robed figure had already disappeared, and was heading towards the four extremes sacred ground. The sacred ground was like spring all year round. Birds sang and flowers bloomed. It was like this from the beginning to the end of the year. At this moment, a white-robed figure appeared above the sacred ground. A strong aura surged and changed her appearance. She was no longer her original appearance. The four innate rankers who stayed behind saw her and were shocked. They immediately went forward to stop her. They had never seen an unfamiliar face before. The four of them were shocked and even more shocked. When did such a strong person appear in the four extremes sacred ground? Ningchen knew that the opportunity was fleeting, and did not dare to delay. He clenched his hand, and the great green sparrow sword flew out from behind him. The bird's cry filled the heavens, and a strong sword will surged out. The momentum was shocking and forced the four to retreat again and again. Quickly informed the Realm Master. Seeing that the opponent's strength was unshakable, one of them shouted anxiously, "It's too late." Ningchen snorted. His figure moved, and his sword was like a reverse waterfall. It spiraled upwards and became a torrent. The terrifying power caused the sacred ground's sky to change immediately. The four of them responded with their sabers and swords and joined forces to receive the attack. With a bang they were all sent flying. The completely different martial way made this battle an overwhelming invasion. With a sword in hand, Ningchen directly broke through the four's resistance and rushed to the front of the formation. The teleportation array glowed with a dim light. Rays of light overflowed and filled the entire array. At the center of the array, a divine jade in the shape of Tai Chi floated up and down. Black and white light sprinkled down, making people's hearts feel heavy. Yin-Yang Jade. Ningchen recognized the identity of the divine jade at a glance. Previously, he had seen a description of this jade in the ancient books of Nine Clouds Mountain's scripture pavilion. This was the treasure of the immortal Ascension realm. It could condense the spiritual chi of heaven and earth quickly, and activate the formation. It was an extremely rare divine item. Nine Clouds Mountain, Cherishing Flower Palace, Immortal Ascension Realm, Longevity Hall, and 4 Extremes Sacred Ground. These were the 4 Extremes Sacred Ground's oldest sections. In terms of age, Longevity Hall was undeniably ranked first. The second was the Immortal Ascension Realm, which specialized in formations. Unfortunately, there was a traitor in the Immortal Ascension Realm. Under the alliance of Longevity Hall and 4 Extremes Sacred Ground, the sect was destroyed overnight. Even the treasure of the sect was taken away. Scroll of Earth. Ning Chen's sword changed direction, and the tip of the sword pierced the ground. Immediately, thousands of rays of sword light shot up from the ground and broke through the formation. There was a loud explosion and heaven and earth trembled. The heavenly book technique clashed head-on with the 10,000-year-old treasure of the Immortal Ascension Realm. It was the ultimate head-on clash. Thousands of rays of sword light shot out from the ground and continuously collided with the yin-yang jade. Ning Chen had come here to break the formation and had already staked everything. Today, no matter what, he had to destroy this formation. 4 Xiantian experts rushed forward and tried to stop him regardless of the cost. The edge of the sword and saber were dazzling and filled with killing intent. You don't know the difference between life and death. With a cold voice, Ning Chen clenched his left hand, and the remembrance blade flew out and entered his hand. Immediately, the frost was cut open, and the ink-black blade roared with ferocious might. The surrounding sky immediately darkened. The scroll of heaven revolved. Black and blue light intertwined and formed an ink-blue radiance that made people's hearts palpitate. Waves of killing intent surged and wild mist howled. The terrifying might of the blade instantly darkened the world. For people were sent flying. Their blood splattered all over the world and dyed the world red. Luring the tiger away from the mountain, 300 li away, the master of the 4 Extremes sensed the change in the sacred ground. He could no longer care about the intruders in front of him, and suddenly sent the golden staff Imperial Preceptor flying with a palm. "Trap him. I will be back soon," said the master of the 4 Extremes before leaving. The 5-colored light that was speeding away showed how anxious the former was. No matter what, nothing could happen to the teleportation formation. The 4 Xiantian experts guarding the sacred ground were heavily injured. Ning Chen opened a path with his sword and saber and forced his way into the formation. Looking at the black and white yin-yang jade in front of him, he slashed down with his saber. Violent shockwaves shook the powerful formation. Finally, a change occurred. The formation runes crumbled and quickly dimmed. The yin-yang jade was knocked away and flew out of the formation. Ning Chen quickly rushed out and grabbed the divine jade. Then he turned around and slashed with his sword. His sword split the 9 heavens and shattered the formation. Retreat! Seeing that he had succeeded, Ning Chen didn't stay any longer. His figure flickered and he quickly left. Impudent! Right at this moment from afar, a vigorous palm energy with the power to destroy the heaven and earth struck towards Ning Chen. Ning Chen's mind was shaken, and he swung his saber to block the attack. However, with a loud bang, blood splashed out, and the figure used the remaining force to quickly escape. How could the master of the 4 Extremes give up? He quickly chased after him, wanting to tear him to pieces. The 2 figures were like 2 shooting stars, one after the other. In the blink of an eye, they were nowhere to be seen. Sui appeared above the white mist in Lingchuan Bewildering Valley. She immediately charged in. With the insect tide blocking their line of sight, they quickly lost sight of their target. Ning Chen immediately used the Chaos Scroll to conceal his aura and entered the depths of the white mist. The master of the 4 Extremes expression was extremely ugly. He also entered the insect tide. His eyes were filled with killing intent and unprecedented fury. "Yuan Hong, recall the insect tide," said the master of the 4 Extremes furiously. In the distance, the bloodied original Venerate heard the master's order. Relying on his bronze body, he once again took a head-on clash and retreated 30 meters. He used a strange technique to recall the insect tide. In an instant, the white mist gathered and rushed toward a huge mountain range in the west. In the blink of an eye, the insect tide had already disappeared. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor saw an opportunity and could finally use his full cultivation. His staff flickered, sending the 2 people in front of him flying. The blue-robed elder was unable to bear the huge force and his body suddenly exploded. You want to leave? Do you think that's possible? The master of the four extremes instantly arrived. Borrowing the momentum of falling from the sky, he sent out a palm. Chapter 312. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor didn't have time to dodge, so he could only face it head-on with his palm. The ground beneath the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor's feet caved in, and cracks spread across the ground. Splashing blood instantly dyed the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor's mouth red. The difference between their cultivation bases was revealed at this moment. The Beiming Imperial Tutor, who was at the peak of the first calamity, was at a disadvantage against the strongest of the four extreme realms. The master of the four extreme realms used another 30% of his strength, and the speed of his descent increased by several degrees. Around the two of them, the ground rumbled and collapsed continuously. This was a clash between two peerless powerhouses. From the very beginning, it was obvious that they were in completely different realms. The entire valley shook violently because of this ordinary move. Life law, first law defying the heavens. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor's staff spun rapidly, and the golden ring shook violently. Boundless golden light shone brightly as it smashed into the Lord of the Four Extreme Realms. The Lord of the Four Extreme Realms didn't fear this move at all. He didn't even take half a step back, as he faced it head-on with his palm. It was a terrifying exchange. Each blow was heavier than the previous one. The close combat made the crisis of life and death even clearer. Brat, come quickly. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor didn't have time to activate the Golden Writ to summon him. On the other side of the mountain range, Ning Chun, who had been chasing after the white mist insect tide, heard the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor's furious voice. He knew that the latter was in a predicament, so he moved even faster. Someone else has entered the valley. Quickly go and find them. The master of the four extremes ordered in a deep voice. His fist shook the world as he forcefully suppressed his opponent. Yes. Ning Chun received the order and headed in the direction of the insect tide. Within the mountain range, the white fog insect tide had all returned. A gigantic white cocoon appeared in front of him. Countless flying insects gathered and attached themselves to it. Ning Chun was shaken when he saw the huge cocoon formed by the insect tide. The cocoon was bound by layers of webs, and its thumping heartbeat was bewitching. Before this strange life form even got close, Ning Chun already felt his heart tremble. It was like a peerless vicious beast was about to be born, evil and powerful. Ning Chun didn't dare to delay any longer when he saw the terrifying power of this ominous thing. He condensed his chi into a long saber and slashed down. The long black stream was like a heaven-splitting waterfall. It drew out a black brilliance and crashed into the giant cocoon with a boom. The saber light, strengthened by the longevity chi, was infinitely close to the three disasters realm. The aura of destruction vibrated, and the white fog insect swarm that was attached to it was instantly drowned by this destructive force. More than half of them dissipated. However, at this moment, a strange red light shone from within the cocoon and swallowed the black saber light. In the blink of an eye, everything returned to normal. Ning Chun's eyes trembled. What was going on? Off in the distance, the lords of the four paramount realms, who were in the middle of a fierce battle, suddenly looked toward the mountain range. Then, with a single palm strike, he sent the Golden Staff Imperial Preceptor flying. The Golden Staff Imperial Master spat out a mouthful of blood as his body trembled. At this point in the battle, he still couldn't understand what had happened. Within the mountain range, the original body finally arrived. He wanted to stop the actions of the youngster in front of him. A bronze palm tore through the air, creating ear-splitting sounds. Ning Chun's mind was focused on the strange giant cocoon. When he saw the incoming palm, he felt irritated. His saber condensed into a black moon and slashed down. The saber light of the half-moon was extremely sharp. It was second only to the golden feather centipede in terms of sharpness. With the support of the longevity chi, it displayed a terrifying might that could destroy anything. The moment the saber and palm collided, blood spurted out, and a severed arm flew out. Just as Ning Chun was about to eliminate the root of the problem, a five-colored light rushed over from the distance. It was already close. Knowing how terrifying the lords of the four paramount realms were, Ningchen didn't dare to stay any longer. His figure flashed and disappeared. The next moment, the lords of the four paramount realms appeared. They only saw the original body covered in wounds and lying in a pool of blood. They scanned with their spiritual sense, but found nothing. In the valley, Ningchen rushed over and quickly left with the heavily injured Golden Staff Imperial Preceptor. How despicable! Sensing that the Golden Staff Imperial Preceptor was also rescued, the lords of the four paramount realms' face became extremely gloomy. Who was this person? How could he hide his aura so perfectly? Brat you! The Golden Staff Imperial Preceptor, who had been kept in the dark this entire time, coughed up another mouthful of blood. This was the first time in his life that he had suffered such a miserable defeat. The lords of the four paramount realms were shockingly powerful. Their absolute suppression had caused the Beiming Imperial Preceptor, who had reached the peak of the first calamity, to personally taste the pain of defeat. Senior Golden Staff Imperial Preceptor, there's no need to say anything else. Hurry up and stabilize your injuries, Ningchen said. Soon after, he increased his speed and tried his best to leave this dangerous place as soon as possible. The two of them landed on a mountain 1,000 miles away. The Golden Staff Imperial Preceptor staggered and quickly sat down to heal. Ningchen raised his hand and pointed. The life scrolls circulated, and a vast amount of true yuan poured into the Imperial Preceptor's body, helping him heal. An hour later, the Golden Staff Imperial Preceptor's heavy injuries were barely suppressed. Ningchen withdrew his hand and calmly waited on the side. Many thanks, brat. The Golden Staff Imperial Preceptor opened his eyes. Senior is too courteous. Fortunately, Senior called out, or Junior might not have been able to rush over in time, said Ningchen tiredly. This phoenix blood should be in the valley just now. It's just that it drew the attention of the four paramount realms. I probably won't be able to get it. The Golden Staff Imperial Preceptor's expression was ugly. That earthquake just now had come too strangely. It was very likely that he had been discovered as soon as he had entered the insect tide, or he had accidentally triggered some mechanism. His luck was truly terrible. The Golden Staff Imperial Preceptor had never imagined that he had been schemed against, and the person who had schemed against him was right beside him. After these days of being together, the Golden Staff Imperial Preceptor's guard against Ningchen had grown lower and lower. Adding on the fact that he had saved him several times, his guard had gradually weakened. He was the one who had discovered the Longevity Hall's insect tide. He was the one who had come up with the idea of searching around the sacred land. He was even the one who had suggested splitting up to search. No matter how suspicious he was, it was impossible for him to suspect the person beside him. The Golden Staff Imperial Preceptor continued to heal. Ningchen looked in the direction of the valley, a trace of worry flashing through his eyes. Just what was that white cocoon? The Golden Staff Imperial Preceptor beside him had been seriously injured again. He did not know how long it would take for him to recover. It was impossible to use him against the master of the four extreme realms. Now that the teleportation array had been broken, the difficulty of traveling between the two realms had increased. They had to pass through the spatial turbulence. However, this could not completely prevent the master of the four extreme realms and other innate masters from traveling between the two realms. The most important thing was to find a way to seal the passage between the two realms. In the heavenly stellar general family, Jiang Xian had been bedridden ever since she had returned from the divine continent. The news of the general family's daughter suffering from a strange illness, and the reward for a famous doctor spread quickly. With the full support of the general family, it had spread throughout most of the Sudden Thunder dynasty in a few days. The rumors became more and more outrageous. All kinds of strange illnesses were spread. Soon the news spread like wildfire. Even the commoners of the other three dynasties knew about it. Not long after, Ningchen also heard the news. He was shocked and immediately set off. Half a day later, Ningchen appeared in Heavenly Stellar City. Without any hesitation, he rushed directly to the general family. In the backyard of the general family, Jiang Xian was pacing back and forth anxiously. However, her expression was normal and did not seem to be sick at all. Her illness was just an act. She had spread the news to attract her master. In the courtyard, Bai Yi materialized. When she saw Jiang Xian, she could not help but frown. What happened? Ningchen asked in a deep voice. Master. Jiang Xian was delighted when she saw him, but the smile on her face disappeared. After a simple explanation, she quickly told him about her trip to the Divine Continent with her brother. Master, Minghua said that something might happen in the Great Xia. She wants you to go back as soon as possible, Jiang Xian said. She and her elder brother had also heard the rumors and slanders in the Great Xia dynasty. It gave people the feeling that this 1,000-year-old dynasty had reached the end of its days. Ningchen clenched his fists. With a move of his feet, he disappeared. In a mountain 1,000 miles away from the Four Extremities Holy Land, Ningchen hurried back. Looking at the old man who was still recuperating, he said, Senior Golden Staff, I have to return to the Grand Xia for some matters. Would you like to return with me? The state teacher Golden Staff slowly opened his eyes and said calmly, You go back first. When I recover, I will go back by myself. Ningchen did not say anything else. He nodded and quickly left. 100 miles away from the Nine Firmaments Mountain, at the peak of the Nine Firmaments Mountain, spatial turbulence blocked the path ahead. It became the greatest obstacle between the two realms. Ningchen did not dare to tarry. He took a step forward and stepped into the turbulence. At this moment, a dazzling pillar of light soared into the sky from the eastern horizon. It was peaceful and clean. It was so familiar that he immediately paused. Wild! Ningchen's heart trembled. His worry had finally been resolved. On one side was news about Wild. On the other side was the matter of his good friend. At this moment, Ningchen had no choice but to make a choice. In the end, he still stepped into the turbulence. Wild had a senior by her side to protect her, so she would be fine. In comparison, Z might have a big problem soon. He could not delay any longer. Bai quickly disappeared in the turbulence. Soon she could no longer be seen clearly. In the Great Xia dynasty, the day of the Xia Emperor's wedding was close at hand. Within the Heavenly Mandate Palace, Xia Zi was sitting on the dragon throne. He was personally writing an imperial edict about reducing the world's taxes. An emperor's ascension to the throne, or his wedding, was a joyous occasion. Many emperors would choose to pardon the world to show their benevolence. Xia Zi knew that it would be difficult to pass down the tax reduction policy. However, many commoners of the Great Xia were already suffering because of natural disasters, epidemics, and years of war. If they had to pay such a heavy tax, it would be even more difficult for them to support themselves. The emperor was benevolent. He wanted to use the wedding as an opportunity to pass down the policy and reduce the burden on the commoners. Your Majesty, the Empress Dowager invites you to Weiyang Palace. A young eunuch walked over and respectfully knelt down to pass down the order. Understood. You can leave first. I will go immediately. Xia Zi replied. He finished the last few strokes of the imperial edict and placed it on the dragon table. He then got up and walked to the back of the palace. A gratified expression appeared on the emperor's tired face. In a few more days, the imperial edict would finally be passed down. At this time, even the officials of the court would not oppose it too fiercely. A light breeze blew into the palace. The imperial edict trembled on the dragon table. Traces of wet ink could be seen. This was the Great Xia Emperor's benevolence toward the commoners. Chapter 313. In the royal capital of Grand Xia, the winds and clouds were constantly changing. An indescribable dark cloud shrouded the entire city. The weather that was supposed to be sunny had now been overcast for several days. The date of Emperor Xia's wedding had been set, and it could not be delayed. One figure after another was busy in the palace, making the final preparations. The granddaughter of Nguo and Rongrua would officially become the new empress of the Xia kingdom in a day's time. Marquis Nguo and Marquis Qinghe were both old officials of the Great Xia dynasty and were extremely loyal to the Great Xia dynasty. Now that his granddaughter had entered the palace, it could be considered as fulfilling one of the old Marquis' wishes. Zhang Sun had already summoned Rongrua to the palace. Ning Shi and Xia Xingyu had also seen this woman. Their impression of her was not bad. She was natural and unrestrained, making people like her. The festive atmosphere spread from the imperial palace to the imperial city. The Marquis mansion and the Princess mansion were decorated with lanterns and colored banners, celebrating together. Madame Luofei still quietly watched all of this, witnessing this historical moment as a bystander. Suddenly, Madame Luofei looked to the west, her eyes flashing with surprise. What was going on? In the next moment, the beautiful figure in the courtyard disappeared and rushed toward the west. There were no words of farewell, nor were there any words of farewell. Xia Xingyu didn't understand what was going on, and was slightly startled. Surprised? Leaving the Eternal Night Cult sect daughter in your mansion? I have to say, your courage has made me look at you in a new light. As he spoke, a figure in a light purple robe appeared. There was a cold sneer on his handsome face as he walked forward step by step. Xia Xingyu was shocked. She wanted to say something, but it was already too late. Soul Catcher. A brilliant light rose from Zhong Qianxiu's right hand, illuminating the heavens and earth with a faint blue light, instantly blinding those who saw it. Xia Xingyu's eyes gradually lost their light and became empty. Not a single trace of consciousness remained. Zhong Qianxiu's lips curled into a cold smile. He waved his hand and disappeared with the former. At the same time, in the west of the Grand Xia Royal City, the Bai Marquis and the Purple Sun Marquis led their 800 guards back. They were returning to stabilize the situation in the royal city for the emperor's wedding. 4 notes of awakening, bright moon in the sky. At this moment, a woman's voice rang out. The lute gently moved, and the bright moon shone in the sky. In an instant, an extremely mysterious sound poured out like water ripples, and the moonlight filled the eyes. The Marquis of Cloth Robe and Marquis of Purple Sun shuddered and retreated. They flipped their palms and condensed their yuan energy, shaking the profound sound together. With a loud bang, the 2 of them retreated several steps back. The blood and qi in their bodies surged violently. Behind them, the 800 personal guards were unable to withstand the power of Xianin. The bodies of those who were slightly weaker immediately exploded, turning into blood and bones that filled the sky. The Confucian sect's sovereign blocked their path. The Bai Marquis and Purple Sun Marquis hearts sank. It seemed that the situation in the imperial city was even worse than they had imagined. Ziyang, I'll bring up the rear. Quickly return to the imperial city, said the Bai Marquis. Come back alive. Without any hesitation, Marquis Ziyang instructed and rushed towards the royal city. You want to leave? Do you think it's that simple? Exalted Li's eyes turned cold. His pipa strings moved, wanting to stop the former. Your opponent is me. The Bai Marquis took a step forward and slapped down with a flip of his palm. They were both half-step Xiantian, but they had completely different abilities. The moment the great Xia Martial Marquis attacked, he shocked the Confucian sect music sovereign. The pipa flipped and blocked Wuho's palm power. With a loud explosion, the sky darkened. The blood that dripped from Pobo's body was a sign that he was at a disadvantage in terms of cultivation level. His clothes were stained with blood, but it could not stop his unyielding fighting spirit. Protect the Martial Marquis. The remaining personal guards moved forward, wanting to protect the Martial Marquis. Reckless. Exalted Li's expression turned cold. His strings moved and a mysterious sound spread out. His body exploded and dyed the surrounding ground red. Both of you back down. The Bai Marquis stood up and said. Martial Marquis. The 2 personal guard leaders said anxiously. Back down. The Bai Marquis said in a deep voice. Back down. The 2 of them ordered with a heavy pain in their hearts. The remaining 100 personal guards quickly retreated. In just 2 moves, the most elite personal guards of the Martial Marquis were almost wiped out. The terror of a 4th Tribulation Xiantian expert was undeniable. I only know how to die for the country on the battlefield. Why do I need to die on the battlefield? The last words were the portrayal of the great Xia Martial Marquis' life of perseverance. The Bai Marquis took a step forward, and a bloody mist surged around him. Exalted Li looked at the blood-stained figure in front of her. For some reason, a heavy feeling rose in her heart. An opponent who was just a half-step Xiantian expert, an ant that she could destroy with a wave of her hand in the past, gave her an indescribable sense of unease at this moment. In the distance, the martial Marquis of Ziyang also seemed to have sensed something. He looked back and felt a sharp pain in his heart. He knew that from today onwards, another companion had left them. On the road ahead, the Confucian experts who had been lying in ambush for a long time appeared and blocked the martial Marquis of Ziyang's path. An endless stream of figures blocked all the paths ahead. The martial Marquis of Ziyang's figure did not stop and charged into the sea of people. The Bai Marquis had risked his life to fight for a chance of survival for him. How could he stop here? The spurting of blood was the last color that the Confucian experts could see. The martial Marquis of Ziyang was extremely murderous and solemn, turning the encirclement into a massacre. A brave opponent. How admirable. Suddenly, a powerful palm came without any warning. The martial Marquis of Ziyang could not react in time. His hair flew off and he vomited blood. The three heads of the current generation appeared at the same time and surrounded the martial Marquis of Ziyang, blocking his last hope. The two marquises were trapped, their bodies dyed in blood. They had planned this for a long time and had no way out. They were determined to kill the two martial marquises of Grand Xia. A bloody mist fell, and the Bai Marquis's body moved along with it. In an instant, a blood figure appeared and struck out with a palm. Its power was dozens of times stronger than before. The short burst of cultivation that he had obtained by burning his life force was no longer restricted by the karma of killing. He had completely stepped into the Xiantian realm. The terrifying power caused the heavens and earth to lose their color. Sovereign Lu blocked with a palm. With a boom, he was also forced back a step by this powerful palm. His blood and chi surged. The martial Marquis's mouth turned red again. But he did not retreat half a step. His fists were heavy and his palms were strong, each strike stronger than the one before. Damn it! Sovereign Lu kept blocking. He did not have enough time to play the pipa in his hand. For a moment, he was actually at a disadvantage. His life force flowed away, and his blood scattered. His confused eyes could no longer see the path ahead. The martial Marquis's body was dyed red with blood. There was not a single part of him that was unharmed. His fists and palms scattered the last glory of his life. In the distance, the three heads and the experts of the Confucian sect had set up a formation to trap and kill the martial Marquis. The battle had also entered its most intense stage. The martial Marquis held the flowing spring spear in his hand. Purple light whistled, piercing the heart and soul. The bravest figure refused to give up in the face of death. His dazzling martial soul was the unyielding belief of the martial Marquis of the Grand Xia. The experts of the Confucian sect became more and more shocked and fearful as they fought. The figure in front of them did not seem to know pain or exhaustion. No matter how serious his injuries were, he never fell. At the peak of the 9 heavens, Ning Chun was trapped in the chaotic flow of space. His expression became more and more anxious as he rushed forward step by step. Spear shadows and saber light constantly clashed. The saber shattered, and he was sent flying. The encirclement could not stop the martial Marquis's heart from returning. Only by fighting could he carve out a bloody path. Sovereign Li's fury grew. Facing 2 half-step Xiantian experts, he had been delayed for so long. It was unforgivable. Taking a palm head-on, Sovereign Lu retreated 30 meters. His right hand pulled, and the 4 strings of the pipa moved together. A terrifying sound shook the heavens and earth. 4 world awakening sounds, heaven and earth burial. Sand churned and the earth sank. The unavoidable and unstoppable sound spread out, causing the heavens and earth to let out a mournful cry. Was this the end? The martial Marquis's lifeless eyes glanced at the land of the Grand Xia that he had protected for his entire life. He had no regrets in this life. Life is fated, death is a wheel. Life and death are reincarnated. The yellow springs open the path. Blood spurted out, opening the path of no return. The martial Marquis's bloody light illuminated the world. With a loud bang, sand filled the sky, and the ground collapsed. Yu Zhongling was hit by the terrifying shockwaves and staggered back a few steps. Ugh! Blood dripped onto the ground. Sovereign Lu pressed his right hand to his chest, his eyes filled with unprecedented shock. Was this the martial Marquis of the Grand Xia? In the dust, a bloody figure appeared. The blood on his body had already dried up. His consciousness was fading, but he was still unwilling to fall. His unyielding spirit would forever remain in the land of the Grand Xia that he had protected for his entire life. Bye. In the distance, Marquis Ziyang felt a sharp pain in his heart when he sensed the departure of his comrades. Some experts of the Confucian sect were sent flying, their blood staining 100 feet. On the other side, the retreating Marquis' personal guards were also ambushed by the Confucian experts. They fell one by one, their souls returning to the battlefield. Seeing that there was no way out, Marquis Ziyang had an epiphany. He plunged the dripping spring into the ground and unleashed his qi. Instantly, a purple light shot up into the sky. The blinding light gathered together, and after a few moments, a purple sun appeared, enveloping everything within 1,000 feet radius. Sovereign Lu was startled. He could feel how terrifying a martial marquis was when he went all out. He rushed forward wanting to stop him. You have to leave alive, and tell His Majesty about what happened today. Remember, you have to survive. His calm words reached the ears of the remaining guards. This was the final will of the Grand Xia's martial marquis. In the next moment the violet sun exploded. Under its powerful pressure, the entire world turned purple. Countless Confucian experts were instantly blinded. Those with weaker bodies exploded, their blood spilling everywhere. Sovereign Lu couldn't stop it in time, but because he was too close, he bore the brunt of the violet sun's power. His injuries worsened, and his mouth turned red. After the aftershock, a vast expanse of sand and dust filled the air, covering the sky and the sun. In the distant battlefield, the encirclement was broken into pieces. The eyes of the martial marquis personal guards were moist. After stabilizing their bodies, they no longer hesitated and fled in different directions. Sovereign Lu spat out another mouthful of blood. Looking at the fleeing people, his heart sank. He ordered, "Chase." Yes, the surviving Confucian experts accepted the order and chased after them. On the battlefield, Sovereign Lu turned his palm and condensed his qi, suppressing the surging blood qi in his body. This battle was far more difficult than she had imagined. Just 2 half-step Xiantian martial marquises had actually injured her to such an extent. It was hard to imagine how powerful the martial marquises would be if they weren't controlled by their killing intent. The Grand Xia Imperial Palace was decorated with lanterns and colored banners. The 7 kings had arrived, and the officials had entered the palace. The day of the emperor's wedding had finally arrived. Chapter 314. The Luo King, King Pinglu, King Tailing, 4th Princess Xia Luzhu, and other members of the royal bloodline came to the hall. The Confucian officials also came. Due to the various wars, the few remaining old generals in the court were also present. Unfortunately, Zhang Sun fell ill and could not come. Qing Ning was taking care of him in the palace, and could only miss this important moment. The palace had been preparing for several days, and did not add too many things. Just as the dynasty was in trouble, Xia Zi had already spoken to simplify the coronation ceremony as much as possible. Just a bow in the hall, and there was no need for a lavish ceremony. The coronation of the current empress was probably the simplest in 1,000 years. Dukin knew that His Majesty empathized with the suffering of the people, and did not wish to be extravagant and wasteful on such matters. Therefore, he deliberately advised his granddaughter not to be dissatisfied. If in Rome was a reasonable person, she would have agreed with a light smile, and assured her grandfather. The 7th king was in the hall, quietly drinking his wine. Although he did not say much, he was happy for his brother. In the past, when the throne was contested, each prince had a choice. The first prince was benevolent, and had always taken care of his brothers as they were young. There was not much affection left in the royal family. Now they naturally knew how to cherish it. "King Luo, Elder Gu wishes to see you on an urgent matter." A servant hurried over and reported. The Luo king narrowed his eyes and said, "Let him wait outside the hall. I will be there soon." "Fifth brother, what's the matter?" King Tailing asked with concern. "I got Elder Gu to investigate something. He should have discovered something. I'll go take a look," the Luo king replied. King Pinglu and 4th princess frowned. They did not want any more trouble at this time. The Luo king got up and left the hall. His expression gradually turned solemn. The matter he had gotten Elder Gu to investigate was not trivial. He hoped that he was just being paranoid. At the same time, in the imperial city, the two sovereigns of Bing and Li arrived. Confucians appeared one after another. The people gathered and walked towards the palace in batches. In the palace's heavenly mandate hall, Xia Zi appeared. The auspicious time was approaching. In the distance, ceremonial music sounded. At the end of the red carpet, a beautiful figure dressed in splendid attire slowly walked over. The coronation hall and wedding ceremony were rare in ancient times. However, this was a special period. The emperor and the future empress did not say anything, and no one else would say anything. Outside the hall, Elder Gu stood there waiting anxiously. His aged eyes flashed with panic from time to time, as he was afraid that he would report too late. The Luo king walked over, and could not help but frown when he saw Elder Gu, who was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. Luo king. Elder Gu immediately walked forward and said anxiously, "What's the outcome?" asked the Luo king. "Luo king, your blood also contains the poison of the Hualuo flower," said Elder Gu with a look of panic. The Luo king's pupils constricted as he suppressed his uneasiness. He said in a deep voice, "Don't make a fuss. Take your leave." "Yes." Elder Gu bowed and quickly left. The Luo king returned from the rear palace and glanced at Xia Zi. Just as he was about to go forward to inform him, he suddenly staggered and vomited a mouthful of blood. The black blood instantly stained the red carpet. The sudden change shocked everyone present. Fifth brother. At the banquet, King Adjacent, King Tailing, and the others were shocked and anxious. Xia Zi turned around, but before he could change his gaze, he saw the figure in front of him slowly collapse. His slightly open lips were saying something that could not be heard clearly. The next moment, King Adjacent, King Tailing, and the other kings' bodies shook violently as they vomited a mouthful of black blood and collapsed. The 7 kings fell together. It was an unbelievable scene. It happened so suddenly, and without warning, that no one could react. Xia Zi was stunned and subconsciously reached out to grab them, but he could not grab a single one. Black blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The pain was soundless, and he could not even feel it. "Escort the emperor." An old general came back to his senses and roared angrily. The dragon guards obeyed the order and quickly surrounded the entire heavenly mandate palace, leaving no exit. "Your Majesty, the Confucian sect is rebelling." 2 marquises were ambushed and died. At this moment, a soldier holding a golden token fell under the steps in front of the heavenly mandate palace covered in blood. He exhausted his last bit of strength and finally brought back the news. As soon as the words fell, the atmosphere instantly froze. The figure in the heavenly mandate palace was dressed in a black robe with gold inlays. His white hair fluttered gently, and there was no trace of black in it. His unusually calm face made everyone present feel an indescribable pressure. Drop after drop of black blood dripped down and dyed the robe. Xia Zi's eyes were filled with endless depth. He was in so much pain that he lost his voice and his mind sank. "Lord Ming, your conspiracy can't be hidden anymore." As he spoke, 3 figures appeared in the sky. The overwhelming righteousness surged and swept away everyone in front of them. In the distance, under the escort of the cultivators of the Confucian sect, a large number of people rushed into the palace. Soon, they came to the heavenly mandate palace. "Your Majesty, you plotted to murder the kings and set a trap to kill 2 marquises. Do you want to give the people an explanation?" Commander Li said with a smile. "He is the reincarnation of Lord Ming. There is nothing he can't do. What is there to say?" Commander Li snorted coldly. "Your Majesty, please abdicate," Commander Li said lightly. 7 respected elders stepped forward, and thousands of people watched from below. In the heavenly mandate palace not far away, the white-haired emperor of Xia Kingdom looked like a demon, and the pressure he gave off was getting heavier and heavier. "Your Majesty, please abdicate." The 7 elders knelt down and said in a deep voice, "Your Majesty, please abdicate." Thousands of people knelt down with anger and fear in their eyes. They used the greatest strength in their lives to release the pressure in their hearts. The demon was the emperor. No wonder the world wanted to attack Xia. They were really blind before. A deafening sound reverberated throughout the entire palace. With a loud rumble, thunder rumbled in the sky, illuminating the dim sky. Among the 7 kneeling elders, Elder Bai, who had been invited by Zhong Qianqiu, opened the red box in his hand. On the blood-soaked yellow silk, there was a phoenix feather. The blood hadn't completely dried yet, making it exceptionally dazzling. The phoenix feather that Xia Xinyu always carried with her had never left her body. Now that it was stained with blood, it had lost all its vitality. Your Majesty, please abdicate. Elder Bai's voice was trembling. Ha! Xia Zi's pitch-black eyes trembled slightly. A moment later, a low laugh came out. It became louder and louder, heavier and heavier. It was so crazy and so sad. The heart-wrenching words and the heart-wrenching scene caused the ruler's final perseverance to crumble. Terrifying demonic aura soared into the sky, and there was no longer any obstruction. The crown on his head shattered, and his white hair stood on end and danced wildly in the sky. He had painstakingly hidden and suppressed it. He had wholeheartedly protected the people of Xia. But this was the result. At this moment it was laughable. The emperor lost his heart due to grief. He had fallen to the demonic path, and would forever be an Azura. Zhang Sun, who had dragged his sick body over, saw this scene. His pupils shrank, and he anxiously called out. However, the emperor couldn't hear him anymore. Demonic patterns appeared, and a drop of demonic mark appeared between the emperor's eyebrows. It was as red as blood. Step by step, the emperor's footsteps were as heavy as mountains. The heavens shook and the earth shook. It was as if the king of hell had descended. Several officials in the hall couldn't bear the terrifying demonic aura. Their bodies exploded, and blood spilled all over the hall. Fear, fear, and still fear. Countless pairs of eyes were filled with fear. The kneeling people no longer cared about Emperor Xia or King of Hell. They got up and ran. However, under the surging demonic aura, any struggle was too late. Step by step, the emperor's footsteps were as heavy as Mount Tai. With every step, hundreds of people exploded. Flesh and blood scattered everywhere. The smell of blood filled the air. The heavens couldn't bear it, and used rain to cover the tears of blood in the emperor's eyes. The heavy rain covered everything in front of him. In the heavy rain, the 1,000-year-old heavenly mandate palace collapsed. It symbolized the glory of this 1,000-year-old dynasty. At this moment, it had completely fallen into the dust. The imperial edict, that was crushed under the ruins, could no longer be issued. Along with the collapsed heavenly mandate palace, it was forever buried in the darkness. Countless bones and blood flowed along with the rain, constantly washing the ground of the imperial palace. In front of the emperor, it had become a complete hell. Step by step he stepped over the bones. Outside the imperial palace, Luofei, who was rushing back, saw the terrifying demonic aura in the imperial palace. Her expression changed, and her speed suddenly increased. On the other side, Ningchen finally rushed back from the 4 extremes. His figure flashed, as fast as the light of water, disappearing in the blink of an eye. His anxious heart became more and more uneasy, and his figure sped up. In the imperial palace, the imperial army of Great Xia didn't dare to stop the emperor. The people didn't dare to stop him, and the 3 Confucians didn't dare to stop him. The demonic emperor of Great Xia had an extremely terrifying aura. In an instant, he surpassed the limits of the 4th and 5th tribulations, breaking through several barriers. Luofei arrived first. Seeing the emperor's white hair stained with blood and completely demonic, she couldn't help but sigh. In the end, he had still come to this step. Ningchen arrived later. Seeing the figure in the bloody bones, his pupils shrank. He stepped forward, wanting to wake his good friend, but was blocked by a beautiful figure. Since Great Xia failed him, he belongs to the Eternal Night sect from now on. He has nothing to do with Great Xia, Luofei said lightly. Ningchen was furious. He slashed out with his sword, and the sword will surged, shaking the heavens and the earth. Scroll of the moon, silent moonfall. Luofei flipped her delicate hand, and the moonlight bloomed to the extreme. A bright moon rose, illuminating the world. The scroll of the moon technique reappeared in the world. In an instant where the moonlight shone, everything was silent and still. Her sword will was temporarily restrained. Luofei flipped her palm, and pushed the person in front of her back. Immediately, she urged the curse with both hands. A faint light shone, and she disappeared with Xiazi in an instant. Ning Chen steadied himself, but it was too late to stop the two of them from leaving. His monstrous anger continued to shake, and the rumbling of thunder resounded through the 9 heavens. At this moment there was also fear. Looking back at the heavenly mandate palace, he saw that it had been reduced to ruins. On the flowing blood, a dark red feather drifted with it, gradually drifting into the distance. Ning Chen walked up the stone steps step by step. Looking at the ruins in front of him, he clenched his right hand, and in the rumbling of the earthquake, a sword with dim autumn light flew out and stuck in front of him. It no longer had the noble spirit of the past. The silence of the autumn water was completely silent. The famous sword of Confucianism was stained with dust today, and its sharpness was lost. Chapter 315. In the Jiming Marquis manner, Lu Ruoxi walked over with a wooden box. She placed it on the table and opened it, revealing a green Marquis robe. Ning Chen took off his plain robe and changed into the Marquis robe. He then took the silent autumn waters and left. In the Confucian Dragon Garden, the 3 sovereigns were solemn. Everyone knew that the Jiming Marquis had returned and would definitely make a big fuss about Xiazi. Thousands of people were deceived by the Minister of Imperial Affairs and waited outside the Dragon Garden in order to persuade the stubborn Marquis to return. The wind blew and the green Marquis roared. Step by step, he walked over with a murderous aura. A mutated rock appeared in the sky, and its roar shook the heavens. The silent autumn waters was dark and filled with murderous aura. Ning Chen was furious and his murderous aura reached a terrifying level. Thunder roared and lightning flashed in the sky. Marquis, you can't continue to be stubborn and kill people for the reincarnation of Hell King. An old man mustered up his courage and shouted. Generations of Marquis were loyal and righteous. They had spent their lives protecting the people of Wuxia. Therefore, although the people present were afraid, they were not too afraid. However, they were all wrong. Ning Chen did not stop. Wherever his sword passed, the people in front of him would explode. Blood and bones flew everywhere. The green Marquis robe fluttered in the wind. At this moment he was cold and emotionless. Marquis were loyal and righteous, but there was one exception. The only reason why Ning Chen was willing to protect these people was because the people he cared about were the people. However, compared to the people he cared about, they were worthless. Xiazi was forced into a demonic state. This completely ignited the anger in Ning Chen's heart. He no longer had a trace of kindness. Wherever he went, blood and flesh filled the sky. Run! This was the only thought in everyone's mind. The panicked crowd was terrified to the extreme. In the Dragon Garden, the Minister of Imperial Affairs and the others were also shocked by this bloody scene. They did not think that Jiming Marquis would dare to slaughter the common people. They wanted to use benevolence to stop him, but they did not expect Jiming Marquis to be so cold and ruthless. The green Marquis walked into the Dragon Garden. He glanced at the Minister of Imperial Affairs and the other Confucian officials. Without saying anything, the silent autumn waters flashed and disappeared. Shwa, a head flew into the air, and blood gushed into the horizon. Autumn waters began to kill, and a brilliant red sword tip appeared. Jiming Marquis, how dare you kill an important official of the imperial court? The Minister of Imperial Patronage roared with fear in his eyes. There was no reply, only the tip of the sword pressing forward. Autumn waters swept past, killing intent awe-inspiring. Jiming Marquis, this is the territory of the Confucian school. Don't be too presumptuous. A 3-foot-long green sword appeared, blocking in front of autumn water. A kung sound rang out as sparks flew in all directions. The Confucian sect's weapon sovereign appeared, followed by the sovereign of ceremony and sovereign of joy. The 3 of them appeared at the same time, and a powerful pressure descended. Together, they pressed their aura toward the young man in front of them. The silhouette of Quanglan raging waves was as immovable as a mountain. In the next moment, his silhouette vanished, and the sword intent howled as it slashed downwards. Sovereign Li was the first to be hit. The judge brush caught the tip of the sword, but couldn't handle the surging sword intent. With a loud thud, it flew backward. 4 world awakening notes, firmament annihilation. Sovereign Lu plucked the 4 strings of the pipa in his hands, and a mysterious sound spread out. The color of the dragon garden changed instantly. Ning Chen's feet moved, and the ground flipped. Pieces of earth rose up, turning into a yellow barrier that blocked the zither sound. The yellow sand covered the sky. Shi Qing's figure pierced through the sand and slashed out with his sword. Autumn light pierced the bones. Sovereign Lu used his zither to block, but he felt the thick true essence pass through. His chest sank, and his mouth turned red. The strong newcomer overturned his impression of him. He was terrifying and solemn, and he didn't hold back at all in his moves. He was furious, and he was furious. The Confucian school experts in front of him were all smashed into pieces by the sword wind. Autumn water was dyed in blood, and it couldn't be stopped. Jiming Marquis, you're going too far. The weapon sovereign stepped forward. The 3-foot-long green sword shook the world, and the overlord's sword aura swept out, splitting mountains and splitting rocks. The other 2 sovereigns also stepped forward. The 3 of them surrounded him, and their palms and brushes moved, looking mighty. Autumn water crossed and blocked the green sword. Frost condensed on the sword fingers, and sword light shot out, shaking the palms and brushes. The moment the 3 of them were in a stalemate, a surging aura spread out. The world instantly turned cold, and waves of snow surged. When snow is near 3,000 miles of sword snow, the sword intent that spread out was bone-chilling. The 3 of them trembled at the same time, and retreated several steps. An illusion of water flashed and instantly appeared in front of Sovereign Lu. The sword fingers pierced through his chest like the sharpest sword. Bang! Blood poured out from his back. Sovereign Li's eyes froze, and blood dripped from his mouth. He looked unwillingly at Long Yuan. How could it be like this? How could it be like this? Her body exploded, scattering all over the sky. From then on, the pride of the Confucian sect vanished into thin air. Sovereign Lu, the weapon sovereign, and Li Sovereign's expressions were pained. The unstoppable figure terrified everyone present. The Confucian school experts gathered, and the heaven-trapping formation was activated once more. The 4 sovereigns held the Confucian school's golden medallion and activated the righteous energy in the world. 4 heaven-piercing chains appeared, turning into streaks of golden light that shot toward the people in the formation. The sword tip shook the golden light. 2 heaven-piercing chains trapped the autumn water sword. The other 2 streaks of golden light followed, piercing the soul. The weapon sovereign charged down from the sky with his sword. He was furious and swore to take revenge for Sovereign Lu. Evil, evil, how dare you call yourself a sovereign? From today onwards, there is no more Confucian school in Great Xia. The frost on the blade of the black divine weapon shattered as a terrifying aura gushed out. With a single slash, the 4 heaven-piercing chains shattered with a bang. The autumn water sword rose up and blocked the sword. True essence clashed, and the ground around collapsed. The weapon sovereign's mouth turned red. In a clash of foundations, he was actually at a disadvantage. Just at that moment, the magistrate's brush stabbed out from behind. It silently shot out streaks of light, and its ability to seal acupoints appeared once more. Back off. The blade light overflowed, and a black aura appeared, swallowing all the light. The Li Sovereign only felt his vision darken, and he lost consciousness. The black blade light sliced through his throat. The Confucian school's sovereign who once laughed and mocked the world had his head sent flying. In his last glance, all he saw was the blood and desolation of the Confucian school before it was destroyed. Li Sovereign. The weapon sovereign's pupils constricted, but he couldn't stop it in time. His body fell, and his blood dyed the ground of the Dragon Garden red. Outside the Dragon Garden, the Imperial Guard and the Imperial Guard had all arrived, but no one dared to enter. They had all followed Ning Chun and experienced the Battle of Mijia Mountain and the coup in the Imperial City. They knew how terrifying the Marquis could be once he was enraged. Today the Confucian school was destined to be wiped out. Kong Yu was anxious, but he didn't dare to take half a step into the Dragon Garden. The evidence of the Confucian school's crimes hadn't been collected, but the Marquis wasn't His Majesty. He wouldn't wait for him to collect all the evidence. Within the Confucian school, the battle was still going on. Nian Qing had appeared, and the battle was completely one-sided. Originally, it was a weapon that relied on the power of forgetting worries to seal the passage between the two realms. Now it completely erupted, and the black longevity fate wrapped around the blade, making the weapon terrifying to the extreme. The Confucian school miscalculated and stopped the return of the Bai Marquis and the Xiang Marquis. They didn't expect the Jiming Marquis to return at this time, and they didn't expect the legendary Jiming Marquis to be so powerful. Out of the 4 heads of the Confucian school, 3 were dead and 1 was injured. Many of the Confucian school's experts were either dead or injured. It was a naked massacre without mercy. Boundless blood and bones were scattered all over the sky. 2 heads were dead, and only 1 weapon sovereign was left. The 3 feet of green light couldn't block the killing intent of the blade, and his injuries worsened. When the blades collided with the black blade light, the weapon sovereign's eyes trembled. He tried to block with his sword, but there was a crisp sound. The 3 feet of green light shattered, and the blade light rushed into his body. Ugh! The weapon sovereign flew dozens of feet away. When he landed, he spat out a mouthful of blood. The blade wound on his chest was so deep that his bones could be seen. Black chi circulated, preventing the wound from healing. Ning Chun waved his hand, and the silence of autumn water flew out and sank into the weapon sovereign's chest. The powerful force carried his body out, and then he was nailed to the plaque in front of the Confucian school's sacred hall. His blood dyed the words, "Long live the noble spirit." From now on, the Confucian school no longer existed. Ning Chun turned and walked out of the dragon garden. Kong Yu walked up, and fear flashed through his eyes. He bowed and said, "Marquis, there's an urgent report from Hanya City. Over 100,000 commoners and thousands of Confucians have rebelled. Prince Hua has been heavily injured and is unconscious." "Got it. Go clean up this place," replied Ning Chun calmly. He then walked away. Kong Yu and the Grand Court entered. With just a glance, they were completely shocked by the scene inside. There was blood everywhere, and broken limbs were everywhere. It was like the most terrifying hell. There were practically no survivors. The only survivor was the current head of the weapon sovereign. His eyes were dull. He had clearly been scared silly. "Don't just stand there. Clean it up," Kong Yu ordered. He knew that this matter had blown up. If the Confucian school was wiped out, the Grand Xia would fall into complete chaos. Yes, the Grand Court's people reacted, and immediately went to clean up. They were all terrified, and their fear of the Marquis grew even deeper. 3,000 Confucians and over 100,000 commoners had gathered in Hanya City. They had taken over the majority of the city, forcing the few remaining defenders to retreat. There were quite a few experts hidden amongst the Confucians. The people who had ambushed Prince Hua had been hidden amongst them. Several of the defending generals had also been assassinated, and their casualties were disastrous. "Prince, let's retreat." Within the city lord's manor, a general urged him. If he didn't retreat now, he really might not be able to hold on. Cough, cough. Prince Hua clutched his chest, constantly coughing, but he still firmly shook his head. Defend to the death. Once he left, Hanya City would be completely lost. In the past 1,000 years of the Grand Xia, there had never been a member of the imperial family who had bowed their heads in the face of a rebellion. He wouldn't be the first. "Prince," the general impatiently tried to persuade him. "There's no need to retreat." Just at this moment, a stone-green figure appeared in the room. Wu Marquis. Seeing the stone-green robes, the general's expression shook, and he immediately bowed. "This general greets the martial Marquis. You can rise. You've already done well. Leave the rest to me," said Ning Chun. "Yes," respectfully replied the general. Ning Chun nodded slightly at Prince Hua. Then with a slight movement of his feet he disappeared. Chapter 316. In Hanya City, Jiming Marquis arrived with killing intent. The Marquis who had lost his benevolence was no longer the same as before. He was even more terrifying than an Azura. The 3,000 Confucians retreated again and again. Blood flowed in Hanya City, completely washing away this ancient city that had been passed down for a long time. Sword light flashed, blood spurted out like a tide. The Marquis of Great Xia, that could not be stopped, turned this rebellion into a one-sided massacre. Jiming Marquis, you killed the innocent. How can you face the souls of the Marquis of Great Xia? The furious Confucians questioned. They were the righteous ones, carrying out justice on behalf of the heavens. They cleared the evil, swept away the evil, and returned Great Xia to its former glory. However, the only reply he got was a cold sword light. The silence of autumn water was left in the dragon garden of the Confucian sect. Now the sword was just an ordinary iron sword. However, in the hands of the green figure, it was comparable to any divine weapon. The blood that spilled out turned into blood, and dripped onto the faces of the Confucians. The pungent smell of blood caused even more fear. More than 100,000 rebels, 3,000 Confucians, facing one person, they had completely lost their will to fight. Other than fear, there was only fear in their eyes. There was no reason, no emotion. From the moment he arrived, there was only killing, bloody and cruel suppression. The Great Xia soldiers behind him did not even dare to step forward. They stared blankly at the corpses that fell one after another. Their faces were extremely pale. Among the Marquis of Great Xia, Jiming Marquis was the one who had been bestowed the title of Marquis for the shortest time. However, he was also the one with the most controversy. In a short 4 years, Jiming Marquis had experienced too many things. From being spurned by the world to having his grievances cleared. The Great Xia had the most complicated feelings towards him. There was respect, and even more guilt. However, they had all forgotten that compared to the other Marquis, Jiming Marquis was indeed the one who had killed the most. At this moment, even the Great Xia soldiers who had experienced the battlefield deeply felt the terror of Jiming Marquis. Their faces could not help but become paler. Wherever the sword passed, broken limbs flew everywhere. Begging for mercy was useless. Crying was useless. Cursing was also useless. There was only killing and killing until the sky was filled with cries. With the city gates closed, there was no way out. The path of the Confucians was completely cut off. The path of the common people was also cut off because of their own choices. They no longer had a chance to regret their choice. In the city lord's pavilion, Prince Hua watched this terrifying massacre and turned his head away. He knew that the scene in front of the heavenly mandate palace had completely enraged the young man in front of him. There was no longer any room for negotiation. At the end of the world, Mount Mijia, the eternal night cult, Mubai, the Buddhas in the mortal world, and Zhong Qianxiu could all see the bloody mist that covered the sky above the Grand Xia. Even from thousands of kilometers away, they could sense the terrifying power of karma. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of silhouettes fell, but the iron sword was still as sharp as ever. The stone-green Marquis uniform was stained with blood, dyed red again and again. On the battlefield, Victorious Return, Clear River, Gu Taiping, and Zhongyong were all silent. Knowing Mandate Marquis had returned, so the other 5 Marquis remained on the battlefield. The Great Xia Marshal Marquis had already tied his life and death to the battlefield. He really did not wish for anything to happen behind his back. Bai and Ziyang did not die on the battlefield, but because of the chaos of the Confucian sect, they fell, which made the Marshal Marquis's hearts turn cold. Lord Marshal Marquis, spare. Before the voice of begging could leave his mouth, it disappeared forever under the blade of the sword. The scenes of the past came one after another, making the sword in Ning Chen's hand even colder. That day, in the heavenly mandate palace, the parting words were heartbreaking. Ze, be careful that the matter of Hanya City will be used by others, and your appearance, although it has not changed much, but, good friend, rest assured, if my people cannot trust me, then what is the use of me being the Emperor of Xia? The words that interrupted him, he could not say that day. He did not expect that it would become the reality that he was most afraid of. Ning Chen was filled with hatred and regret. He could not have imagined that when he returned, things had already become like this. He could not save Xianyu, nor could he get Zi back, and even the corpses of the 2 marquises could not be found. The cold light of the murderous aura, along with the flames of anger, cut through the bloody light of death, sending those who begged for mercy, those who quibbled, and those who cursed were all sent to the underworld. There was no reason, no mercy, and no justice, there was only slaughter. In the past, The emperor was merciful, thinking that if he put himself in other people's shoes, he would always be sincere. But he did not expect that in the end, he would be forced into the demonic path by his own people. In the past, the emperor was righteous, waiting for evidence, and ruling the dynasty with the law, but he was forced to abdicate by those who did not want to speak of the law with the name of the king of hell. Today these so-called people wanted to beg for mercy, beg for their hearts, beg for reason. But unfortunately, the people who were willing to listen to reason were no longer here. Ning Chen was not his good friend Zi. The mercy in his heart was never more than a little bit. With a slash of the sword, blood spurted out like a fountain, rising more than 3 meters high. Unwillingness, resentment, regret, all the phenomena of the world, in the last moment of life, were so clear. Shi Qing's figure moved among the crowd. Every slash of the sword would cause a large number of people to fall. The sight was filled with blood, flowing in the city like a small river, extremely dazzling to the eye. Lord Marquis, please spare us. Under extreme fear, the figures kneeled down one after another, crying, kowtowing, shouting themselves hoarse. It was too late for regrets. Not long after, tens of thousands of people all knelt down in fear, begging. They were completely scared out of their wits by the person in front of them. Broken limbs were everywhere. The entire Great Wisdom City was like an Azura hell, causing people to be unable to raise any thoughts of resistance. Ning Chen did not have any expression on his face. Just as the sword in his hand was about to move again, a slender hand appeared and lightly pressed down on the sword. Stop, it's enough. Qing Ning appeared. Looking at Ning Chen, who was covered in blood, a trace of tears appeared in her eyes. Prince Hua dragged his heavily injured body over with the help of the general. He looked at the young man holding the blood sword and said, Jiming Marquis, leave the rest to me. Even if you kill them all, what's done can't be undone. Ning Chen glanced at the two of them. Waving his hand, his sword flew out, stabbing into the city wall with a bang. Let's go back to the palace. After speaking, Ning Chen turned and left without looking back, leaving behind countless terrified gazes, not daring to get up for a long time. In Weiyang Palace, Ning Chen returned to the palace for the first time since the change in the palace the day before yesterday. Looking at Zhang Sun in front of the bed, he knelt down deeply. Lady, Ning Chen came back late. His guilty words echoed in the room. Even someone as smart as Ning Chen did not expect such a big change to happen this time. Before leaving, he had warned her repeatedly, but now it was all gone. Zhang Sun reached out and touched the face of the person in front of her. The real touch made her feel a little warm in her heart. Lady, please don't worry. I will definitely bring Xinyu and Zi back. Looking at Zhang Sun's haggard face, Ning Chen's heart ached, and he promised. After an hour, Ning Chen left Weiyang Palace and went straight to the Lord Protector's manor. The collapsed Heavenly Mandate Palace was so dazzling that the figure in the distance had a murderous aura that penetrated deep into his bones. In the first hall of the Eternal Night Divine Sect, many generals stood. On the high throne, a white-haired figure sat quietly. The demonic mark between his eyebrows was as red as blood, and his deep and dark eyes always gave people a kind of heavy feeling that could not be dissolved. Below, Zhong Qianqiu bowed politely and said, Welcome, Demon Lord. Welcome, Demon Lord. Below, all the generals knelt down and said respectfully. Opposite Zhong Qianqiu, Luo Fei quietly looked at the figure on the throne. Her beautiful eyes were as calm as water, without any sadness or joy. You may leave, the figure on the throne said. Yes. The generals immediately got up and left. Zhong Qianqiu and Luo Fei also left. The door of the temple closed, and the light in the temple dimmed. The young face on the throne was still looking into the distance, and even sadness could not overflow from his deep eyes. Outside the first temple, Luo Fei stopped and said lightly, Zhong Qianqiu, where is Xia Xinyu? She should know the importance of the 7 extinction body to the divine sect. Naturally she is dead. Zhong Qianqiu smiled lightly. Zhong Qianqiu, don't think I don't know what you have done. There will be no next time. Luo Fei said flatly, and then stepped away. Zhong Qianqiu's mouth curved up. He looked back at the temple behind him, and then walked towards the abyss of darkness. Under the demon god's statue, a dark atmosphere rose. A row of stone coffins was faintly discernible in the dark qi. Zhong Qianqiu, you have brought him. A supreme and noble voice said calmly from the dark qi. Master, I have brought him back. But he was once the emperor of the Grand Xia. Can we trust him? Zhong Qianqiu knelt and respectfully asked. It's fine. His mind has been completely devoured. It is impossible for him to wake up, the dark qi said. In the Marquis mansion, Ning Chun returned. Lu Ruoxi stepped forward and took off his blood-stained robes, changing into his usual plain clothes. Lord Marquis, department head Tai Li requests an audience, the old steward said respectfully. Let him in, Ning Chun said. The old steward obeyed. Not long after, he brought Kong Yu in and then withdrew. Lord Marquis. Kong Yu respectfully bowed. What is it? Ning Chun asked. The evidence of the Confucian sect embezzling the treasury, forming factions, and attempting to rebel has been gathered. However, the superior Sirius flower and dark Sirius flower that poisoned the kings have not been found, Kong Yu respectfully said. Didn't I leave you a soldier commander token? Ning Chun coldly asked. Kong Yu hesitated for a moment before saying, This person seems to have gone mad. We interrogated him for a long time, but all he said was some crazy words. Have you ever seen a half-step Xiantian scared out of his wits? Ning Chun coldly snorted. You don't need me to teach you how to make him confess. You are the department head Tai Li now. This subordinate knows his mistake. Kong Yu lowered his head. I don't have time to care about these things. No matter what method you use, I just want to see the results. Also, send someone to Marquis Zhongyong and ask him to pay attention to a woman called Daylily. I will have someone send the portrait to you as soon as possible, Ning Chun coldly said. Yes, Kong Yu respectfully replied. You may leave. This subordinate will take his leave. Kong Yu bowed and immediately left. The moment he left the Marquis mansion, his heart slowly calmed down. In less than a quarter of an hour, his clothes were almost completely soaked. Chapter 317. On the western battlefield, the battle between Marquis Triumphant Return and the number 1 Divine General of Evernight, Baiqi, was growing increasingly intense. With the death of a martial monarch, the two armies were almost evenly matched, and it was difficult to determine a victor. In the midst of the battle, the cry of a green sparrow sword suddenly resounded through the 9 heavens. The tip of the sword flashed past like a flash of light, instantly arriving on the battlefield. Divine General Baiqi's mind turned cold. He pulled back his spear to block, and the purple lightning divine spear swept out to resist the sword edge. With a loud explosion, heaven and earth shook. The tip of the sword suddenly turned, and the light of the water swayed continuously. It was an extremely fast move, and afterimages filled the sky. Ding ding ding, the divine weapons clashed. The sword was fast, and so was the spear. The green sparrow against the purple lightning, each displaying their sharpness. Marquis Triumphant Return came back to his senses. Without asking any questions, he raised his glorious arrow saber and slashed down. Suing quickly retreated, and the valiant saber might instantly arrived. Baiqi spun his spear to block the saber might, but with a pung sound, blood splattered 3 steps away, and he vomited blood from his mouth. Retreat! Seeing that the situation was unfavorable, Baiqi immediately ordered his troops to retreat. The army retreated in a majestic manner. Baiqi held purple lightning as he held up the rear, blocking the pass with his spear alone, not moving like a mountain. Senior Victorious Return, take the troops and chase after them. Leave this person to me, Ning Chun said. Be careful. The Victorious Return Marquis solemnly instructed, and immediately led his troops forward. Opportunities were precious, and would never come again. However, the number 1 Divine General of Evernight was also immortal. He was abnormally powerful, and at the 5th Tribulation realm. But his combat strength was close to the 3 Calamities realm. Baiqi wanted to return in triumph, but was stopped by the Green Sparrow, unable to take half a step forward. A martial Marquis against a Divine General. Both of their chi surged. A violent gust of wind surged. Their might was shocking. The divine weapons clashed once again. The Green Sparrow and the purple lightning crisscrossed at high speed. The sonorous sounds of collisions rang out incessantly. The murderous aura threatened to seize one's soul. A powerful divine general, a brave martial Marquis, sword light, spear tip, one move fast, the other even faster. The brilliance of the two intersecting blades illuminated the peerless demeanor. The battle at the peak caused the surrounding heaven and earth to tremble along with it. Earth Scroll, Earth Destruction and Mountains Destruction. The Scroll of Earth appeared once again. Tens of thousands of sword intents surged out from the ground, boundless and endless as they soared into the sky. Bai Qi waved his spear and spun it around. Purple lightning filled the spear and transformed into a sea of angry thunder. It surged out and collided with the sword intent. The two attacks collided, causing a sandstorm to erupt. Ning Chen dashed out, and his sword instantly closed the distance between them. With a clang, a heavy fist collided with the sword edge. A trace of blood drifted down, but the divine general did not seem to notice. Purple lightning swirled around, threatening to kill. Heaven Scroll. In close combat, black light appeared, and the saber light was dazzling. The ice seal had not been broken, but it was still unshakable. With a bang they collided. The remembrance of love and the purple lightning collided. Both of them retreated 3 steps, their blood and chi shaking. Do you want to break the seal? I'll give you a chance, said Bai Qi calmly as he looked at the saber in the youth's hand. No need. Ning Chen replied coldly. He wasn't moved by the former's words. His longevity chi wasn't inexhaustible. After the battle with the Confucian sect, he'd used up almost half of it, and couldn't use it again. What a pity. I originally thought that I would be able to have a more enjoyable battle. Bai Qi's figure flashed, and he took a step forward. Purple lightning flashed, creating a dazzling light that seemed like it could split a mountain. It's enough to deal with you. Ning Chen's saber and sword danced as he blocked the attack. Pieces of the ground flew up, but they were immediately turned into sand by the aftershock, filling the air. The black saber turned around and descended. Bai Qi leaned to the side, avoiding the saber. The tip of his spear shook, knocking away the sword. Then, the saber spun horizontally, accompanied by the crackling of purple lightning. Ning Chen retreated half a step and slashed out with his saber, shaking the tip of the spear. Then, he took half a step forward, and his saber and sword clashed. Saber, spear, and sword clashed beautifully. It was an extremely dazzling battle of martial arts, but it was also dangerous. Life and death were only a matter of time. Bai Qi's expression gradually turned serious. He originally thought that with the death of the principal, Great Xia's top fighting force would only have one victorious return expert. He didn't expect that there would be another knowing destiny expert. The completely different war soul in front of him caused Bai Qi's underestimation of him to disappear. He was very clear that this youth already had the strength to stand on equal footing with him. Forgiving heart style lightning breaks 10,000 caddies. Bai Qi circulated his cultivation to the extreme. Purple lightning lingered on the tip of his spear, turning the area around him into an abyss of purple lightning. Ning Chen focused. His feet moved, and a surge of cold air quickly spread out. In an instant, heaven and earth turned into a world of ice and snow. Purple lightning against ice and snow. It was the most extreme collision. Heaven and earth seemed to have suffered a calamity. The earth collapsed, and huge ravines split open. Gods cried and ghosts howled. Saber and spear clashed, sword followed, and heavy fists landed. Both of them suffered a blow, and their faces turned red as they retreated. Seeing that the youth in front of him couldn't win in a short period of time, Bai Qi was worried about the army in front of him. He took advantage of the momentum and quickly retreated. Ning Chen frowned. His figure flashed as he chased after him. In the next few days, under the joint attack of Marquis Triumphant Return and Ning Chen, the Blackwater army advanced westward. They were like a hot knife through butter, forcibly creating a huge gap in the encirclement of the church's army. With the death of the martial monarch, it was difficult for Divine General Bai Qi to resist the might of 2 Marquis. The church's army was beginning to show signs of defeat. Ning Chen and Marquis Triumphant Return's goal was clear. They wanted to lead the army to the Evernight Church and rescue Xiazi. In the second hall of Evernight, Zhong Qianxia was standing in the middle of the hall. Looking at the five-colored figure floating in the air, he said, "Realm Lord, shouldn't your realm show some sincerity and share the anger of the martial Marquis of Grand Xia?" The realm lord of the four extreme realms replied calmly, "Hall Lord, you might not know, but the yin-yang formation has been broken. Currently, it's difficult for my realm to cross realms. I'm temporarily powerless." "Oh, then you can't send troops?" Zhong Qianqiu said coldly. "Apologies." The realm lord of the four extreme realms replied indifferently. Soon after, the multicolored light dispersed and disappeared. At the same time, on the western front, Marquis Clear River, Marquis Jiyu, and Marquis Taiping also increased their offensive. They worked together with Marquis Triumphant Return and Marquis Jiming to exert the greatest pressure on the Evernight army. The five martial Marquis led the army eastward with all their might. The Evernight army immediately felt the heavy pressure and kept retreating. The 10,000 soldiers of the Second Divine Hall once again appeared on the battlefield. They wanted to stop the Grand Xia's terrifying offensive, but they were stopped by a single sword. The great battle between the top experts and the army of thousands attracted the world's attention. For the entire day, the invincible Divine Martial Army suffered a great defeat for the first time. They lost nearly half of their forces, and their formations were broken one after another, unable to block the Azure Sparrow's edge. This battle shocked the world. The name of the Grand Xia Jiming Marquis shocked the world. In most people's impression, this martial Marquis of the Grand Xia, who had once competed with the world's #1 sage, Fan Lingyue, was known for his intelligence. Although his cultivation was also extraordinary, he was still somewhat lacking compared to the top experts. No one had imagined that the Grand Xia Jiming Marquis, who no longer hid his strength after the incident at the Imperial Palace, would be so terrifying when he went all out. Marquis Triumphant Return and Ning Chun continued to lead the army eastward. Under the cover of the other three martial Marquis, their advance became faster and faster. They were already close to the Eternal Night Cult. Ning Chun stood in front of the Blackwater Army's main camp, looking at the Eternal Night Cult in the distance with a cold glint in his eyes. "Very soon, Jiming Marquis, you must prepare for the worst," Marquis Triumphant Return said as he walked out of the commander's tent. "I understand." Ning Chun nodded. The night was slightly cold. The bright moon shone down on the ground like a waterfall. Ning Chun stood in front of the tent for the entire night. When the sun rose, Qing Ke returned to the wooden box and placed it on his back. "Senior Triumphant Return, let's go." "Yes." Marquis Triumphant Return brought Glorious Era with him and headed east. The army set out, majestically heading east. Today, the two strongest martial Marquis of the Grand Xia were finally going to confront the Eternal Night Cult. In front of the Eternal Night Cult, one general after another walked out. Together with thousands of deacons and elders, they joined forces to protect the front of the cult. Facing the fury of the martial Marquis of the Grand Xia, their expressions became grave. The death of a martial Marquis greatly affected the cult. The two martial Marquis of the Grand Xia were unable to withstand the three disasters, causing the entire cult to feel heavy pressure. In the distance, two figures were walking side by side. One was overbearing and imposing, while the other was as calm as water. Their auras were different, but they were both undefeatable. The Grand Xia War God's cultivation was infinitely close to that of the three disasters. And he also had Triumphant Return's treasure, Glorious Era. His strength was extraordinary, and even ordinary three disasters experts would find it difficult to deal with him. On the side, the young martial Marquis no longer hiding and scheming. After recovering from his injuries, he finally displayed a terrifying battle strength that shocked the world. Zhong Qianqiu and Baiqi stood in front of the other generals. Looking at the two approaching figures, they didn't dare to be careless. One-on-one, the storm that arose would ultimately decide the result of this long and drawn-out war. Divine General against War God, Martial Marquis against the Temple Master. The great green sparrow sword flew out, and in the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of Zhong Qianqiu. Develop yin and yang, form the four divisions. There is no sun in the 8 directions. Borrow the power of the universe. Zhong Qianqiu once again used Divergent, and the formation opened. A huge 5-star light appeared under the two people's feet, constantly revolving, turning into rays of green light that blocked in front of them. Ning Chen's expression didn't change. The green sparrow frost sword increased its speed by 30%, and a sword pierced through the air, blocking the formation's power. Rays of green light blocked the sword, but they couldn't withstand the terrifying sword intent on the sword and showed signs of collapsing. Cracks appeared on the ground, and in the next moment, the light screen shattered. The sword was 3 feet in. Zhong Qianxiu retreated 10 steps. With a flip of his right hand, a green talisman appeared, summoning the power of heaven and earth to form 4 evil gods that trapped the person in front of him. A cold light flashed in Ning Chen's eyes. His watery shadow stepped out, and in a flash, he dodged the evil gods and appeared in front of Zhong Qianxiu. The sword was cold, and as it slashed through the air, it was like a snowstorm, slashing across the killing light of death. Zhong Qianxiu's expression turned cold, and he retreated another 3 steps. This time, he was slower by half a beat. A sword wound appeared on his chest, and blood flowed out. When facing the same person again, their strength was completely different. Without the burden of injuries, Ning Chen was able to use his full strength. The green sparrow dance, killing light filled the sky. On the other side, Baiqi was facing the great Xia war god, and the situation wasn't looking good. The glorious era military knife suppressed the purple lightning. Although the victor had yet to be decided, defeat was only a matter of time. Zhong Qianxiu, you've lost this bet. It was at this time that the doors to the number 1 shrine of Evernight opened, and a beautiful figure appeared outside. She had said that there was no way she and Baiqi could stop the 2 furious marquises of Grand Xia. Zhong Qianxiu's expression sank as he withdrew from the battle. He glanced back at the shrine behind him and said, "Lady Zhong, you've won. Demon Lord, please take action." With that, the number 1 shrine of Evernight began to tremble. A white-haired figure walked out, his black robes fluttering in the wind, shocking everyone present. Chapter 318. The white-haired figure that descended from the divine palace had a pair of deep eyes that were as dark as an abyss. There was not the slightest fluctuation in his eyes. His black robes fluttered as he walked over step by step. A heavy aura reverberated through the battlefield. The Grand Xia's Blackwater army generals were shocked. Was the person in front of them still the benevolent and upright crown prince of the past? There was no need to answer this question. A black demon sword flew out of the shrine and landed in the black-robed figure's hand. In an instant, the Grand Xia's generals were all forced back several steps. The demon sword of reincarnation was even more powerful in the hands of the Devil Emperor. Its terrifying pressure made it difficult for people to breathe. "Welcome, Devil Emperor." The shrine's generals bowed. Divine General Baiqi also bowed respectfully. The divine sect respected strength, and this bow was enough to explain everything. "Z." Ning Chen's heart ached. But before he could speak, he saw a black figure appear in front of him. The demon sword slashed down, causing the heavens to collapse and the earth to split. In that moment of crisis, Ning Chen subconsciously raised his sword to block. But with a boom, Z was sent flying and forced back several steps. Blood dripped from his injured right hand along the blade of his sword. With just one move, he had displayed a strength that made people tremble. "Friend, you've become weak." The cold words didn't contain the slightest trace of emotion. Only the sharpness of the demon sword pierced his heart. Marquis' triumphant return was shocked. He wanted to step forward to help, but he was blocked by a purple figure. "Marquis' triumphant return, you should be careful of yourself." Zhong Qianxiu coldly snorted, and used his special technique to help Divine General Baiqi block the Grand Xia's war god. Purple lightning filled the sky, and with the support of the Sea of Lightning, it was even stronger. Marquis' triumphant return found it difficult to take even half a step forward. With the Devil Emperor joining the battle, the situation instantly changed. The Devil Emperor was no longer benevolent. His attacks were ruthless and unstoppable. The darkness energy, that had been sealed in the Forbidden Land for hundreds of years, had completely assimilated the righteous energy of the Confucian sect. This allowed the Devil Emperor's cultivation to break through the limits of the 5 tribulations and reached the peak of the Three Calamities realm. The demonic sword danced, and black demonic energy curled around it. Each move was stronger than the last, and the murderous light was like a falling mountain, causing the universe to tremble. Ningchen used his sword to block the attack. The green sparrow cried, unable to withstand the mighty demonic might. His former best friend had now drawn their swords against each other. Ningchen felt a throbbing pain in his heart. His sword potential unconsciously weakened once more. The evil sword slashed across mercilessly. Ningchen took half a step back, blood gushing out of his left shoulder. Not too far away, Luofei was quietly watching the battle. It was rumored that the great Xia Jiming Marquis was cold and heartless. But now, it seemed that no matter how cold a person's temperament was, there would still be times when they couldn't do anything. Jiming Marquis, since we are acquaintances, I'll give you a word of advice. If you don't want to die here, it's not too late to turn back now. Madame Luo calmly said. Not far away, Zhong Qianqiu couldn't help but frown when he heard this. Just what was this sect girl thinking? The killing light of samsara was dazzling. The extreme demonic might forced Ningchen to retreat again and again. He was surrounded by danger. With a clang, the two swords clashed once more. Ningchen's lips turned red, dyeing his clothes red. Seeing that his best friend had entered the demonic state, Ningchen's heart was filled with pain. He finally made up his mind. He clenched his left hand, and remembrance entered his hand. A surging sword intent swept through the heavens and earth. Saber potential appeared behind it. Frost descended from the heavens, creating a solemn scene. I'm sorry. Ningchen knew that if he didn't win this battle, he wouldn't be able to bring his best friend back. He suppressed the unbearable feeling in his heart. 3 scrolls appeared at the same time, and he fully activated his cultivation. In an instant, his shocking foundation erupted. A strange light flashed in Madame Luo's eyes. What extraordinary decisiveness. Even now, this battle still wasn't over. Facing the opponent's strength, the demonic emperor wasn't afraid at all. The samsara demon sword was raised to the heavens. Demonic chi spread out, and its might shook the heavens. Autumn water flows through the yin and yang. Light appears in the sea of clouds. This was a Confucian technique, but it was filled with a heaven-shaking demonic chi. The demonic cultivator urged his cultivation, and demonic chi soared into the sky, splitting apart the sea of clouds. Light descended, and this technique stirred up the winds and clouds, forming a giant vortex. Black light blocked out the sun, and a powerful demonic chi spread out, giving people the illusion that the end of the world had arrived. The demonic technique of the past was now displaying its most terrifying might in the hands of the demonic cultivator. Wherever the demonic chi spread, the flowers didn't smell, the birds didn't cry, and the world seemed dead. Heaven and earth cry life and death defying fate. Saber and sword appeared in a rainbow light, bursting forth with the most elegant style. Sabers fell from the sky, and the earth swords rose. In the dead world, only the sharp light of sabers and swords could be seen, blooming in the demonic chi. Ugh! The two extreme techniques collided, and a terrifying shockwave spread out. The two of them bore the brunt of the impact. They both swallowed their injuries, and were forced back several steps. The demonic cultivator and the life-knowing cultivator didn't stop. Their sabers and swords clashed once more, drawing out beams of light that were faster, heavier, and more ruthless. This was a dazzling battle. The two's incomparable battle souls caused all the other heavenly geniuses to pale in comparison. Sect girl, are you still not going to attack? On the other side of the battlefield, Zhong Qianqiu angrily shouted. My matters aren't for you to meddle in. Luofei indifferently replied. Then are you going to meddle in Xia Sinyu's life? Zhong Qianqiu icily asked. The battlefield instantly changed. Ningchen's body trembled, and he was immediately infuriated. The phoenix feather had appeared in the chaos of the imperial palace, but he hadn't been able to find Xia Sinyu's whereabouts. So it really had been the eternal night god sect that had secretly done this. When the demonic cultivator heard Xia Sinyu's name, his eyes twitched. But in the next moment, demonic chi curled up once more, restoring the darkness. Outside the battlefield, Luofei's calm expression finally turned cold. Killing intent flashed in her eyes. Zhong Qianxiu, don't let me find out that you're lying to me. Otherwise, not even your status as a palace master will be able to save your life. As soon as she finished speaking, her figure shot out, instantly entering the battlefield. Moonlight flowed around her hands, shaking the blades of swords and sabers. Luofei's sudden appearance caused the balance of the battle to shift once more. The scroll of moon displayed a strange ability. Sabers and swords rapidly slowed as they approached. A battle between three peak powerhouses was rarely seen in the world. Ning Chun was fighting 1 against 2. His saber and sword danced, his expression unprecedentedly focused. Sword against sword, saber against palm, his battle spirit soaring. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps rang out in the distance. Each step was steady, neither fast nor slow. It was clearly imprinted in the hearts of everyone on the battlefield. In the next moment, azure robes appeared, dancing in the wind. His handsome face was calm and indifferent as he slowly walked over. Behind him was a little girl with a sword stand on her back. She was as charming as ever, and her pure sword heart caused everyone to stare at her. The sudden appearance of the two caused the intense battle to come to a standstill. At this moment, it was as if time had stopped. Wild, the Yin Grand Prince calmly said. Wild responded and gently put down the sword stand on her back. She stretched out her hand and pulled out a light blue sword. She turned into a stream of light and instantly entered the battlefield. The cultivation of the first tribulation of the Khanate realm was not conspicuous in the current battle. Everyone present was the peak powerhouses of the Xia dynasty and the Eternal Night sect. Ordinary Khanate realm cultivators were not even qualified to participate in the battle. The initial heart displayed its sharpness. Her sword swept out, causing the peak powerhouses present to be shocked. The sword arrived in front of her in an instant. Luofei focused her mind, not daring to be careless at this moment. She activated the scroll of moon, intending to use her absolute cultivation to fight against the sword. However, the initial heart's sword seemed to have sensed it. Before the strong move could be made, the sword edge had arrived in advance. Luofei frowned and changed her palm stance again. Unexpectedly, the initial heart's sword edge changed accordingly, still anticipating the enemy's advance. It was extremely strange. With a bang, the sword and palm collided. The sword's momentum was endless, and the palm's momentum had yet to rise. It was actually a draw. The people present were not ordinary people. They could see the exquisiteness of the sword at a glance. At this moment they were even more shocked. It was the first time they had seen a sword like this, that predicted the enemy's advance, and forcibly sealed the opponent's move. Ning Chen activated his remembrance, and knocked away the demonic sword in front of his eyes. He took the opportunity to glance at the battle beside him, and was also shocked by a man's sword move. Although it was only a short 1 or 2 moves, he could see that a man's cultivation was extraordinary. His opponent was Luofei. Even he had to focus on her, but a man was able to exchange blows with her for a short time. It was really incredible. Prince Yen stood outside the battle, and looked at the battle in front of him. He nodded gently. Although diligence could make up for stupidity, talent was never something that could be ignored. Ning Chun, this brat, had been unable to comprehend the sword breath. However, a man's heart was clear and pure. I don't want to hurt you. Back down. Luofei's aura fluctuated. She flipped her palm to knock away the initial heart's sword and said calmly, "A man, back down." The aftermath of the collision of the sword and saber surged. Ning Chen forcibly blocked the demonic reincarnation sword's edge, and retreated half a step. A man had truly become stronger, but his opponent was the Eternal Night God sect's disciple. He couldn't last for too long. At this moment, Prince Yen flipped his right hand, and condensed his sword fingers. Azure and red swords flew out, transforming into 2 streaks of light that landed on the battlefield. With a boom, everyone was pushed back. Alright, stop fighting. The 2 swords separated the 2 battles. The Grand Xiao's current legend had taken action, instantly ending this battle. Senior, Ning Chen's expression became anxious. There's no need to say anything. Prince Yen waved his hand to interrupt him. Looking into the depths of the Eternal Night God sect, a light flashed in his eyes. Eternal Night God Sect's leader, are you still not coming out? Heaven and earth changed colors as a powerful aura slowly awakened. A moment later, a dignified voice resounded throughout the world. Grand Xiao's Prince Yen, you really didn't disappoint me. Behind the second hall of Evernight, a third divine hall rose from the ground amidst loud rumbles. The majestic and magnificent divine hall resonated with the first and second divine halls from afar, creating a spectacular sight. The third shrine of the Eternal Night God Sect had finally appeared in the mortal world. It's him! Ning Chen immediately reacted. He recognized this aura. Back then, he had felt the same when he had used that palm. It was shockingly powerful. Zhong Qianxiu by Qi Luofei, this battle is over. Devil Lord, the battle has only just begun. There's no need to rush. A calm voice rang out from the third shrine. Yes, father. Luofei respectfully bowed. Since sect master said to stop, Qianxiu naturally wouldn't dare disobey. Zhong Qianxiu's lips curled into a mysterious smile. Xiazi didn't reply. He took out his demonic reincarnation sword and returned to the first shrine. Chapter 319. Ning Chen's fists turned pale as he watched his friend disappear into the first shrine. His heart was heavy. Let's go back. Imperial Prince Yin waved his hand, retrieving his swords. Ning Chen knew that he wouldn't be able to bring Zi back today. He sighed and left. The army retreated into Grand Xia territory. The appearance of the third hall of Evernight would definitely change the war. Marquis Victorious Return's expression was solemn as he hurried back to arrange a countermeasure. Imperial Prince Yen brought the two back to the Grand Xia Imperial City. He hadn't returned for many years, so he had to go back. The road ahead was long, and Ning Chen's brows were tightly knitted. Wild reached out and smoothed his furrowed brows. Not good. Ning Chen suppressed his thoughts and forced a smile. The only person who hadn't changed after all these years was Wild. The road ahead was difficult, and Imperial Prince Yen wasn't in a hurry. Wild wasn't in a hurry, and it was useless for Ning Chen to be anxious. He walked at a steady pace through the wilderness, his simple yet noble robes fluttering in the wind. He was a living legend, stunning both the past and the present. Senior, Ning Chen said anxiously. Quiet. Prince Yen did not turn his head. He only replied calmly. Ning Chen sighed. He had no choice but to continue forward. 10 days and 10 nights later, the three had walked out of the western frontier and into the central plains of Grand Xia. However, they were still quite far from the imperial city. Because of Xia Zi's demonization, Ning Chen's anger rushed to his heart, and he used extremely bloody methods to forcefully suppress the rebellion of the Confucian school in Sanskrit City. However, the greatest taboo on the path of cultivation was to be tainted by karma and not be able to guard one's original heart. Imperial Prince Yen could see that Ning Chen wasn't far from the fourth tribulation. If the latter were to attempt it in his current state, failure would be the only outcome. On the 11th day, a ghostly aura appeared in front of them as a beautiful red figure appeared. It was a Rakshasa, her eyes cold. Follow me once you're done, Yanqing Prince said. He didn't stop and continued forward with Man Ning. Chen looked at the ghostly woman, who had suddenly appeared with a hint of shock in his eyes. Her red wedding dress was still bloody red, and her charming face was no longer covered by the red silk. Her beauty was enough to make one lose their soul. This was the first time the two of them had met since they parted that day. The ghostly chi around the ghostly woman, who had returned to her Rakshasa form, became even colder. Those who were unsettled would instantly lose themselves in it. Rakshasa had always been a symbol of viciousness and ruthlessness in hell. They were merciless and bloodthirsty. If they were to develop feelings, they would have to suffer for themselves. If I turn into a demon in the future, will you attack the Eternal Night Church like you did to save Xiazi? The ghost girl asked. Her calm words carried a tinge of coldness. Rakshasa had feelings, but fate was merciless. 8 or 9 out of 10 things in the world did not go according to one's wishes. Once a Rakshasa lady in the netherworld returned to her original heart, her humanity would gradually disappear until she ascended to the throne of the netherworld. Luocha was evil by nature, and her kindness was nothing more than an illusion. Although Luocha was reluctant to part with her, She could no longer stay. Ning Chen didn't know what Ghost Lady was implying, but he still nodded seriously and replied, "We are friends. Ning Chen will not shirk from the matters of friends." A glint flashed across Ghost Lady's cold eyes. She said softly, "Your words are enough. If I turn into a demon in the future, you don't have to be merciful. Ghost Lady is willing. We will meet again." With that, the ghostly mist rose again. The red figure disappeared in the blink of an eye. "Ghost Lady." Ning Chen went forward, but he only touched a trace of red. He could no longer see the figure in the ghostly mist. On the road ahead, Prince Yan walked forward step by step. He didn't care about the junior behind him. Whether it was a tribulation or fate, he had to experience it himself. "Ah man, he followed you for 10 days. Did he feel the sword breath once?" Prince Yan asked. Ah man shook his head and said, "No." Heh. Prince Yan didn't ask any more questions and continued walking. A fool and a fool. Most of the time, the distinction between them was not clear. If it was only in terms of intelligence, wisdom, and scheming, then even 10 A-mans added together wouldn't be able to compare to a single Ning Chen. Besides that military advisor of the Northern Ming Imperial Court, perhaps no one else in the world could surpass this junior. Unfortunately, intelligence did not mean talent. Ning Chen was smart enough, but he had too many obsessions in his heart. His sword heart could not be clear. If he couldn't let go, he might not be able to feel the sword breath for the rest of his life. Behind her, Ning Chen followed. Because of Ghost Lady, the worry between his brows deepened. A man reached out again to smooth his frown and said softly, "It doesn't look good." Ning Chen came back to his senses and smiled. However, his smile became more and more forced. "Give me your sword," said a man as she pulled his hand. Ning Chen was startled. Before he could speak, a man had already placed her other hand on his chest. "I want the one inside." The Knowing Destiny sword was the sword of the bloodline. Its importance was self-evident. However, a man had already asked for it. Ning Chen had only rejected a man once in his life. Since then, no matter what happened, he never said no again. This time was the same. Yes. Ning Chen didn't hesitate at all. He flipped his right hand and circulated his true essence. A bloody mist filled the sky and the Knowing Destiny sword slowly rose into the air. Blood-red lines crisscrossed the azure sword. Dazzling bloody light revolved around it, as if it was alive. It was extremely extraordinary. A man took the sword. In the next moment, the Knowing Destiny sword entered her body and chose a new master. Their bloodlines were connected, so there was no problem of bloodline rejection. A moment later, the bloody light dissipated and vanished. Ning Chen's face was slightly pale. Having lost his Knowing Destiny sword, his aura had weakened quite a bit. In the next few days, the three of them slowed down even more. The Yan Imperial Prince had given Ning Chen time to recover. No matter who it was impossible for them to recover in a day or two after losing their sword. Fortunately, Ning Chen's foundation was extraordinary, and he also had the protection of the phoenix blood. After 5 days of recovery, he was mostly fine. Rumble. Just as the three of them were continuing on their way, the eastern horizon suddenly darkened. Thunder rumbled, shaking the 9 heavens. Ning Chen was shocked. He immediately recognized the location of the thunder. It was in the direction of the Ascension Valley. In the Ascension Valley, thunder rumbled in the 9 heavens. The Realm Master had arrived in the Divine Prefecture. The Realm Master of the 4 extreme realms had reappeared. His aura was even stronger than before, and he looked much younger than before. At this moment, all the innate experts in the Divine Prefecture felt this unshakable aura. They were all shocked. "Oh!" In the 3rd palace of the Eternal Night Sect, a soft exclamation was heard. Apparently, he was also surprised by this sudden change. Divine Prefecture, haha. The casual smile grew bigger and bigger. No one could doubt the arrogance of a supreme expert. The Divine Prefecture's sad cry seemed to indicate the arrival of an even greater disaster. How can this be? Ning Chen clenched his fists so tightly that they cracked. He looked at the figure in the distant horizon and felt powerless. In the west was the 3rd Palace Master of the Eternal Night Sect. In the east was the Realm Master of the 4 extreme realms. This time, what else could he do? At the same time, the 5 marquises of the Great Xia all felt something. Their eyes were unprecedentedly serious and determined. The 1,000-year Great Xia must not be harmed in their generation. A strange and heavy pressure spread out in the eastern sky. All of a sudden, a white memory flashed in Ning Chen's mind. It became clearer and clearer. Although the weak aura was not too obvious, it was not completely undetectable. The white cocoon he found in the Lingchuan Valley had a similar pressure. Ning Chen's expression darkened. If this was really the case, it could not be worse. He had not found a way to deal with the white fog insect swarm. Last time, he did not have time to eliminate the problem. He did not expect to leave such a huge disaster behind. Let's go. Let's continue. Prince Yen said calmly and continued forward. Senior, Ning Chen said anxiously. How could he be at ease? Calm down. Prince Yen said calmly, unmoved. Ning Chen was anxious, but there was nothing he could do. He followed behind patiently step by step. After more than 10 days, the 3 finally reached the imperial city. After the chaos of the Confucian sect, all the imperial guards in the imperial city were mobilized. When an imperial guard commander saw the azure-robed figure, he was shocked and immediately knelt down. Greetings, Prince Yen. When the soldiers behind saw their commander salute, they were shocked. Then, they also knelt down and saluted respectfully. Greetings, Prince Yen. The 7 kings were in trouble. The Xia emperor had become a demon, and the imperial bloodline of the Great Xia had almost withered. Now the most legendary prince of the Great Xia had finally returned. Rise! Prince Yen walked forward without stopping, all the way to the royal palace. Ning Chen and a man walked at the back. Prince Yen had returned. In the imperial palace, all the soldiers knelt down to welcome him. The legend of the Great Xia had finally returned. In the center of the imperial palace, the heavenly mandate palace, that had once represented the glory of the Great Xia, had already disappeared. Prince Yen glanced at it, then walked toward the Weiyang Palace. After Xia Zi had become a demon, the only bloodline left in the imperial family was Qi, who was not even 4 years old. The matters of the imperial court could only be sent to the Weiyang Palace, and asked the bedridden eldest grandson to make decisions. The warnings of the Confucian sect in Prajna City were still vivid in their minds. After seeing the bloody methods of the Jiming Marquis, the officials of the court calmed down. No one dared to provoke him at this time. The crimes of the Confucian sect had been investigated by the Taisei and announced to the world. Even the matter of them poisoning the kings had been proven. There was no room for quibbling. The Taisei's methods of interrogation were the best in the world. The secret interrogation room had become a forbidden area for the entire Taisei. The Taisei had found out everything he wanted to know from the military commander and confirmed the crime of the Confucian sect's betrayal. Most importantly, in this special period, anyone who wanted to cause trouble had to weigh the pros and cons of the Jiming Marquis. The destruction of the Confucian sect in Prajna City was almost massacred. This was not a dream, but something that had happened in reality. This was the bloodiest rebellion in the Great Xia in the past 1,000 years. In the Weiyang Palace, Prince Yen walked over with 2 juniors. Qing Ning went up to welcome them. She then led Man to the side and left some space for the 3 of them to talk. Ning Chen looked at the bedridden eldest grandson. Sadness flashed across his eyes. The empress who had once tried her best to protect him had really grown old. There was more haggard and tiredness on her beautiful face. The successive blows made Jiangxuan's body, which was not very good to begin with, finally unable to hold on. She grew weaker day by day. Chapter 320. Great Xia did not have an emperor, and Jiangxun was the only person in charge. She had to personally decide all matters in the court. Jiangxun had already received the news that Yan King had returned. Seeing the 2 of them enter, she waved her hand and called Ning Chen forward. Empress. Ning Chen sat in front of the bed and looked at the haggard Jiangxun. He squeezed out a smile. The Jiming Marquis, who was strong and cold in front of everyone, also had things that he was afraid of. Especially when Jiangxuan's body was getting worse and worse. This fear was increasing by the day. Jiangxun saw the fear in the young man's eyes, and she reached out to touch his face. She smiled. It's okay, you are not married yet. No matter what, I will hold on. Ningchen nodded his head and forced a smile. Empress, your words are the imperial edict. You have to keep your word. Zhang Sun nodded and handed over the document in her hand. This is in country Marquis proposal to add a new Marquis. Take a look. Ningchen took it and took a look. He understood the gist of it. Since 4 years ago, close to half of Great Xia's marquises had died in battle. This was not the first time someone had brought it up. And country Marquis had a son who had been a Marquis for many years. He had many military achievements, and was one of the top candidates. And country Marquis was an old official, and his loyalty was unquestionable. This document might have some selfish motives, but it was normal. There is also the head of the Tylee department. He has contributed a lot to this rebellion. Who do you think is more suitable, him or Marquis Anling? Zhang Sun asked again. Ningchen kept silent. In truth, be it Kong Yu or Anling Marquis, they had not reached the level of a Marquis. Every martial Marquis that was conferred the title of martial Marquis in Great Xia had to be able to hold their own. In terms of strength and strategy, the two of them were much weaker than the martial marquises on the battlefield. Seeing Ningchen keep silent, Zhang Sun naturally understood what was going on. There were many marquises in Great Xia, but there were only a few marquises. From this, one could see how difficult it was to become a Marquis. It was not that they did not want to become a Marquis, but that no one could. The imperial family owed the in-country Marquis family. Zi had left during Enrongrua's empress coronation ceremony, and the coronation was not completed. The Marquis of Enling was the only son of the Marquis of Kingdom, and he was also Enrongrua's father. His status was illustrious, and coupled with the military merits he'd accumulated over the years, he was indeed considered to be outstanding amongst the current candidates. Nyang, allow me to consider this matter for a few days before giving you an answer, Ningchen said softly. Yes. Zhang Sun nodded and said, all right, you can leave first. I still have some matters to discuss with Prince Yan. Ningchen stood up, bowed respectfully and then left. Outside the room, Qing Ning was whispering something to a man. When she saw a man walk in, she stopped whispering. Chased out? Qing Ning asked bluntly. A man just laughed along and didn't say anything. Ningchen walked up and looked at a man in confusion. He then looked at Qing Ning. It should be the first time the two of them had met. But why did it feel like they were more familiar with each other than him? Wild, what are you talking about? Asked Ningchen curiously. Sister Qing Ning said that I can't tell you. A man answered honestly. It's okay. Women always say the opposite. What she means is that you can tell me, Ningchen said seriously. Pow! Qing Ning slapped him. Feeling the pain in his head, Ningchen immediately became much more obedient. A man also slapped him. Then she looked at her own hand and smiled prettier than a flower. Ningchen was helpless. This girl had learned bad things from him. At this moment, a 5-colored ray of light descended from the sky. A terrifying pressure descended, shaking the entire imperial city. Ningchen's expression changed and he stepped forward, protecting Qing Ning and a man behind him. He flipped his hand to receive the 5-colored light. Qi waves surged around him, and his white robes danced wildly. The Holy Land's kill order. Ningchen glanced at the name that Danju had crossed out. He raised his head and looked at the terrifying figure in the sky. His expression became grave. Jiming Marquis, this sovereign has come to take your life. In the sky where 5 colors circulated, a supreme figure stood tall. The sky and earth trembled unceasingly, as if they were unable to withstand the pressure. Waves of mournful wails rang out. The master of the 4 extremes was even stronger than before. His strength had reached a terrifying level. Today, he had come for the King of Disaster's order, and the Yin-Yang 2 elements formation. He was determined to kill the Grand Xia's Jiming Marquis, who had disobeyed the Holy Land. Master of the 4 extremes, you've overstepped your boundaries. Amidst the calm voice, the door opened, and a green figure walked out, speaking indifferently. Prince Yan, I've only come today for the Jiming Marquis. Don't make me change my mind and start a massacre, said the master of the 4 extremes coldly. Is it that serious? Asked Prince Yan. The master of the four extremes coldly snorted. His body flickered, and he used the momentum of falling from the sky to slap down with his palm. Then die. A wild and tyrannical aura descended. His palm split heaven and earth. Prince Yin narrowed his eyes and sent out a palm to meet the master of the four extremes. The ground shook violently, and rocks flew everywhere. Prince Yan's feet sank 3 inches into the ground, and the ground around him cracked and spread in all directions. Not far away, on the sword rack, 4 swords flew out at the same time and stabbed into the ground. Instantly, the collapsed ground quickly stabilized. Prince Yin pointed out with his left hand. Sword intent surged and soared into the sky. Seeing this, the master of the four extremes retreated 100 meters, dodging the magnificent sword chi. Ningchen, protect them, Prince Yin instructed. Then he stomped his foot, and the 4 swords flew up into the sky. In the sky, 2 figures were facing each other. One was covered in 5-colored light, while the other was wearing azure-robed. The master of the four extremes was fighting against a legend of the Grand Xia. The peak experts of the current generation were facing off. The 3 palace masters of the Eternal Night God sect looked over at the same time, calmly watching this crucial battle. If a legend of the Grand Xia was defeated, then the final sky of the Grand Xia would crumble. Down below, Ning Chen's expression was extremely grave. Although he had absolute confidence in his senior's strength, the current master of the four extremes was different from before. He had reached a higher level of enlightenment, and no one knew just how far he had advanced. Flame Calamity, the master of the four extremes, clenched his fist. In the midst of thunder and lightning, a peerless weapon appeared and landed in his hand. The Flame Calamity had once again descended upon the world. Facing a reborn opponent, Prince Yin waved his hand and summoned Abyss Condensation. The black sword swallowed all the light around it, making it difficult to distinguish. The Flame Calamity was a battle of sealing swords. When the 2 swords clashed, fierce flames surged. The light of the sword and the saber attracted the attention of all the Xiantian experts in the world. The Battle of the Peak had just begun, and it had already displayed its magnificence. Strong, a completely different kind of strength. It was so strong that it was difficult for people to touch it. The master of the four extremes used his weapon as support. His true essence surged out endlessly. A strange power shook the wind and clouds. One sword, forbidden martial arts, no Tao under the heavens. Prince Yan's sword aura changed. Abyss Condensation sword intent circulated in his hand. Black light spread out, devouring the heavens and devouring the earth. In the most extreme collision, the sword and the saber vibrated together. Ripples spread out, spreading to thousands of miles away. In the extreme east, at the end of the world, Mu Bai, who was sitting in the sky, was also attracted by this peerless battle. Countless sword lights circled around, buzzing softly. In the sky above Dexia's imperial city, the master of the four extremes became stronger as the battle went on. With his weapon in hand and his cultivation that far exceeded his past, he gradually suppressed Abyss Condensation sword light. Jiga. Seeing this, Prince Yin clenched his left hand. Among the 3 floating swords, Jiga flew past, and the heavy sword's sharpness reappeared. With a clang, the sword and saber clashed again. It was a completely different move. It was as heavy as Mount Tai, breaking the sky. The 2 swords moved side by side, and the death light shone in the sky. The situation of the battle changed again. The master of the four extremes' expression sank. He turned his palm to block the sword. Vast vital energy shook, and his cultivation broke through the limit. In the shocking change, streaks of white light appeared and spread endlessly. A strong pressure surged out. Below the battle, Ning Chun leaped up and stood 10 feet in the air. He activated his martial arts and activated the life scroll to its peak. Snow fell from the sky and spread endlessly, protecting everyone's safety. At this moment, the entire imperial city was covered in snowflakes. They fell to the ground and melted, removing the divine might from the sky. Snow in July was a marvelous sight. Countless eyes looked at the figure above the imperial palace, feeling ashamed. At this moment, the one who was truly willing to protect them was still the Marquis they had once abandoned. Ningchen didn't care. He didn't care anymore. He looked at the sky seriously. With a wave of his right hand, 2 streaks of light flew from the Marquis residence and arrived instantly. In the sky, the master of the 4 extremes merged with the power of the white cocoon in his body. The light around him turned white, and he reached the peak of his strength. Just as the battle started again, the snow below suddenly rolled wildly. An extreme brilliance rose. In the dazzling silver light, the death break bow was fully drawn, and the heaven pardon arrow was drawn. The Zhao family's bow. The master of the 4 extremes frowned. He moved and retreated 10 feet away. On the fully drawn death break bow, the heaven pardon arrow kept gathering spiritual chi. Its aura rose rapidly, approaching the limit of the 3 disasters and still rising. In the 3rd hall of the Eternal Night Divine Sect, the figure on the throne had a strange expression. The Zhao family's bow. The divine continent actually still had an item from the Zhao family. In front of him was the great Xia dynasty's Prince Yan, whose combat power was not yet exhausted. Below him was the Zhao family's bow, whose power was unknown. The master of the 4 extremes didn't want to take the risk. He retracted the white light around him and returned to his original state. He stepped forward and left the battlefield. Jiming Marquis, cherish your last days. We'll meet again. The 5-colored light dissipated, leaving behind a final warning. The terrifying pressure above the imperial palace also disappeared, and everything returned to normal. Looking at the departing figure, Prince Yan's eyes flashed. He moved his hands, and the 2 swords in his hands turned into streaks of light and flew down, along with the 2 floating swords not far away. They entered the sword rack, and their sharpness disappeared. Ningchen landed. Because he had used all his strength to activate the death break bow and the heaven pardon arrow, he had used up a lot of energy. His face was slightly pale. This master of the 4 extremes was getting stronger and stronger. If it weren't for the senior restraining him, he might not even have the chance to draw the bow, let alone spend time gathering power. Be careful. Qing Ning looked worried. With such a powerful expert of the 3 disasters watching, it was no small matter. Don't worry, I will be careful. Ningchen smiled tiredly and comforted her. The master of the 4 extremes couldn't wait to attack. He definitely wanted to take back the Yin Yang Jade. This time, it was really troublesome. Chapter 321. In the northern wastelands, the calamity of hell descended. Underworld flames burned the world. Amidst the heartless laughter, an extremely evil figure appeared. Flames burned everything within 100 li, turning everything into scorched earth. He was an anomaly of the underworld. He had neither heart nor virtue, but he had the greatest aptitude in the past 10,000 years. After breaking through the Xiantian restraints, his cultivation continued to rise, and he was already on the verge of the 5th Xiantian tribulation. A ghost girl in a red wedding dress chased after him. She relied on the connection between the underworld spring and the ghost origin to chase after him. She knew that there was not much left of her humanity. She was about to regain her original Rakshasa nature. Although the ghost girl was reluctant to part with it, she could not hold it any longer. At the very least, at the very last moment, he had to get rid of this greatest threat for him. Fellow cultivators killing each other. It truly makes my heart ache. Underworld child stretched out a finger and swiped it across his lips. A nonchalant smile flashed through his devilish eyes. The ghost girl didn't say a word. Her first move was the ghost desolation. Today, she didn't want to win, but she wanted to enter the Yellow Springs together with him. 100 ghosts trapped the sky. The ghost desolation art was activated once again. Ghostly shadows swirled in the air, not to attack the enemy, but to surround the 2 of them within 1,000 feet radius, completely cutting off their path of retreat. Dear fellow practitioner, may I say something stupid? As soon as he finished speaking, Netherchild's feet moved, and he instantly arrived in front of Yi Chun. His palm carried the dark blue flames as it violently surged out. Ghost desolation art, soul severing. The ghost girl's hands were surrounded by cold ghost energy. Her divine power was innate. She took the attack head-on. Her long hair, which had turned from black to red, danced in the wind, adding to the atmosphere of a battle to the death. When the 2 palms collided, the ground was instantly split apart. The underworld spring trembled with ghost energy, and within 1,000 feet, the sun did not shine. For thousands of years, the strongest underworld child fought a life-and-death battle with the ghost woman. With a flip of his palm and a kick, the power of evil ghosts spread out. The mortal world was like hell, and the vitality of grass, trees, birds, and beasts were rapidly sucked away. There was no turning back. The ghost girl's final wish before entering Rakshasa was to give up her life, and give up everything. In the battle of punishing evil, there was no room for mercy. If he was going to do evil and harm the people he treasured, then before that, he would join hands with Xia Wang. The gloomy and cold ghost Qi produced black ice flowers in the surrounding heaven and earth, sealing the underworld flames. The ghost desolate killing aura shook the heavens. The earth that was riddled with holes once again suffered a calamity. It collapsed completely, sinking down several zhang. There was no longer any trace of gentleness on her beautiful face. It was cold, still cold, so cold that it made one's heart tremble. The underworld child responded. The corners of his mouth had already turned scarlet red. The ghost woman's killing intent was on full display. Her strength had surpassed the limits of the underworld spring. Even the protection of the underworld spring couldn't compare. Haha, the injured divergent from the underworld didn't show any fear. Instead, the laughter from his mouth became even more ear-piercing. Those who had lost their minds didn't seem to feel pain. They didn't even care if their bodies were destroyed. At this moment, the madman who had chased after every minute, or even every second, felt a sense of excitement that he hadn't felt in a long time. Facing the ghost girl's fierce killing move, he didn't retreat but instead advanced, trading injury for injury. Similarly, the ghost girl did not dodge or evade. She only attacked and did not defend. She used all of her ghost origin, not to heal, but to strengthen the power of the ghost desolate. Ghost Qi and evil Qi intertwined, and the injuries on their bodies became more and more serious. However, the fierceness of their moves did not weaken at all, and each move was stronger than the last. Underworld flame against desolate ghost. The battle between the two of them was originally evil, but because one of them had a human nature, a change occurred in this generation. This battle was no longer a simple slaughter. The underworld child raised his hand, and evil flames surged. He punched out, and ghost Qi burned, causing ghosts to howl. With a bang, the ghost girl forcibly resisted. She turned her palm, and condensed a myriad of black frost. A world-shaking palm imprinted itself on the underworld child's body. The splashing blood could not stop the increase in killing intent. After being repeatedly injured, the ghost origin's underworld origin became weaker and weaker. The heavens and earth mourned. An ear-piercing tremor sounded as if they were crying for this world-shaking battle. The smile on the underworld child's face became even crazier. The stimulation of death had finally allowed the divergent to feel his true existence for the first time. Calamity flame invades the heavens. The underworld child took a step forward, and calamity flames gushed out. A sea of flames rose up in a 300-meter radius. He used his most evil move again, and dark blue flames violently surged out with the power to destroy the heavens. The ghost girl's figure flickered. Ghost Qi surged around her and rushed into the underworld flame. Patches of black frost dissipated, and at the final moment, her delicate hand broke through the obstruction and imprinted itself on the underworld child's chest. With a bang, 2 waterfalls of blood scattered. Ghost Qi poured into the underworld child's body. However, the underworld flame also invaded the ghost girl's body. Both sides were injured and blood splashed out. The bitter battle did not stop at all. It would only stop when one side fell. The blood that splashed out during the battle slowly fell to the ground. The beauty of life was that there was only one chance. The ghost girl had her own perseverance. She did not want a Rakshasa to appear in the world. She had to finish what she had to do while she was still a human. As her injuries became more serious, it became harder to suppress her Rakshasa nature. The ghost girl knew that the final moment had arrived, and she did not delay any longer. She took the attack head-on and rushed forward. With a flip of her palm, she grabbed the underworld child's body. Ghost Desolation Art, Infernal Annihilation. The Ghost Desolation Art finally appeared in the world. In an instant, Infernal Annihilation Art was destroyed. 10,000 meters of land collapsed. The two figures that fell together continued to fall. The ghost girl was determined to perish together with the underworld child. She did not want to let go. Since they were cultivators, they could not be of one mind. Then they would die together. The huge rocks and dirt that fell were about to bury the two figures. From today onwards, the legends of the underworld would be buried. However, at this moment a change occurred. Under the collapsed ground, a terrifying red earth flame appeared, bringing with it a monstrous heat wave. The scorching earth flame spread between heaven and earth. The black snowflakes formed by ghost chi quickly melted, and most of their power dissipated. Dear fellow cultivator, you have failed. In the midst of the earth flame's heat wave, a smile flashed across the underworld child's face. The underworld flame around his body rose again. With the help of the terrain, he dispersed the ghost origin in the ghost girl's dantian sea of chi. The ghost girl fell to the ground and vomited a mouthful of blood. Looking at the lava that was scattered all over the sky, she sighed in her heart. She did not expect that she would let him escape death in the end. With the ghost origin destroyed, ghost chi scattered. As her body flickered, the ghost girl looked in the direction of Grand Xia's imperial city. A trace of reluctance flashed in her eyes. She had done her best and hoped that he would have a happy life. The Rakshasa returned to her heart. Before she disappeared, the ghost girl returned to her original appearance. Her eyes were red, and her blood-red hair fluttered in the wind. Rakshasa, you've lost. The underworld child's rare smile vanished as he spoke coldly. The underworld's laws dictate that the victor rules. The loser has no complaints. The Rakshasa no longer had the slightest trace of emotion. The underworld child walked forward, his body also becoming incorporeal. After countless years, his two bodies finally merged once more. In an instant, a terrifying aura appeared, causing the world to change color. The terrifying fluctuations shook the world. A power that surpassed 5 tribulations and reached the level of 3 tribulations caused all the martial artists in the divine continent to clearly feel this heavy pressure. Within the underworld palace's netherworld hall, the red demon saber and purple gold divine sword trembled once more as they sensed the underworld master appear. In the next moment, they turned into 2 rays of light that shot towards the distant battlefield. Within the Knowing Destiny Marquis residence, Ningchen suddenly felt a heavy feeling in his heart. In the past, the Rakshasa had only briefly established his life, but today he had a special feeling. An intense unease rose from the depths of his heart. Ghost girl. Ningchen was shocked. He took a step forward and disappeared. Oh, the underworld child has won. The underworld king has appeared. Interesting. Within the Eternal Night Divine Sect's 3rd Divine Palace, a valiant figure stood up from the throne. Heaven and earth trembled, unable to withstand the terrifying pressure. In the northern wastelands, the underworld child's appearance changed after fusing with the Rakshasa's body. His handsome face gained a noble and dignified aura. His dark blue battle armor turned a flawless white amidst the red and blue colors. The king of hell had appeared. Dark clouds instantly covered the sky as lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. An unusually powerful pressure filled the world. It hadn't completely appeared, but it was undoubtedly one of the 3 tribulations. It was shocking. Within Peerless City, the Lord of the 4 Extreme Realms was alarmed by this powerful aura. He looked towards the north of the Grand Xia and frowned slightly. At the same time, in the northern wastelands, 3 streaks of light shot through the sky, 1 in front and 2 behind. Their speed was shocking. Ghost girl. Not long after Sui arrived, what entered her eyes was a scene of devastation. It was clear that the previous battle was tragic. The blood had not dried yet. A familiar aura overflowed, shaking the hearts of those who came. The last words were still vivid in her ears, but the person in front of her had completely changed. Half familiar and half disgusted, clearly indicating the outcome of this tragic battle. Ningchen was furious. He didn't say a word. His sword moved and arrived in an instant. With a clang, the sword broke through the void and pierced the underworld king's chest. However, A surging wave of air surged out and blocked the tip of the green sparrow sword. Is it hatred? Is it anger? Foolish human emotions? Back off. At this moment, the purple and red streams of light flew from afar. The Calamity Demon blade and the forbidden sword were in his hands. The Underworld King's body showed its power. His true yuan spread out. Instantly, a terrifying wave of air rushed out and knocked Sui away. Ning Chen landed on the ground and took a few steps back. A trace of blood quietly slid down the corner of his mouth. The Underworld King's strength was shocking. With just one move, he defeated the great Xiajiming Marquis, whose strength was close to the Three Disasters realm. With his friends in trouble one after another, Ning Chen could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. He finally lost his mind and no longer cared about the matter of sealing the passage between the two realms. He clenched his left hand, and the Remembrance sword was in his hand. The frost collapsed and the black fate exploded. With the addition of fate, his entire body turned black. Ning Chen stood in the endless darkness. His figure flashed, and he took a step forward. His black blade severing soul. With a loud bang, heaven and earth exploded. The blackened divine weapons were a pair of world-destroying demonic blades. Violent shockwaves surged out, and the destroyed earth was stirred up by 100 feet of sand, shaking heaven and earth. The furious Ning Chen no longer had his usual calmness. He released all of his cultivation. With the blade and sword in his hand, black chi surrounded him. He used the power of the three scrolls to fight the Underworld King. Yama's forbidden sword, annihilation. The Underworld King waved the forbidden sword in his hand. Purple light shone brightly. With one slash he killed Ning Chen. Ning Chen did not retreat at all. The Dayan green sparrow condensed frost and met the attack head-on. The frost surged and the pair of divine swords shone. The clash between the blade and the sword reached its peak at this moment. Ning Chen in his strongest state fought the Underworld King. One blade and one sword, killing light was rampant. On the east and west, the Eternal Night Hierarch and the Masters of the Four Extreme Realms were watching this battle in the north of the Great Xia Dynasty. What a Underworld King, what a great Xiajiming Marquis. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.